place very shortly in this order. Craig Lowndes on pole position there, #1 for the 21-year-old, with Greg Murphy, the second of the Holden Racing Team cars. Falcon alongside him. Glenn Seaton, who's won here 3 times. Alan Jones backs him up from 3rd position. Larry Perkins, who's won here, 4th grid position, with Russell Ingall, the Formula Ford driver. Peter Brock, 9 times winner. And Wayne Gardner, not a winner here, but Neil Crompton, his co-driver, is. Dick Johnson, John Bauer, the winners from last year, and worse off when they started in 15th grid position. Charlie O'Brien, Steve Johnson, their teammates backing them up. Tony Longhurst has won here back in the Ford Sierra days, and Mark Scaife, Jim Richards likewise have done so. Mark Larkham, Warwick Rooklyn, a factory-type car, if you like, a little bit outside the factory, but with a lot of backing from Mitre 10. And David Attard doing very well as a privateer and well backed up by his co-driver Greg Crick. Brad Jones, Win Percy, that's an interesting entry and should run well. In fact, in the early days of qualifying and practice here, it was running extremely well. Tony Scott comes out of his production racing Volvo with Steve Ellery, the best of the privateers in the Super 2 litre class. Ashby and Reid are together again after missing some rounds of the Touring Car Championship, and young Paul Romano doing very well in the recent rounds of the Touring Car Championship. Mark Poole, South Australian, who came out of Formula V and other single-seaters, got Ed Ordinsky with him. A renowned rally driver, very experienced. David Parsons, a good runner, and with the venerable and veteran John Goss coming from somewhere back into the field. Kevin Waldock has a brand new car to take 19th position. Chris Smurden and Graham McConville. McConville slipped a little bit in his ratings with the factory teams where he was last year. And finally Ian Palmer, the brother of Ross, the racer, and Brett Peters also make up the rear end of the grid, and that to me is a very strong field. It's all V8s, as John Smales told us earlier. And let's hear from the man who's on 3rd grid position, Alan Jones, the former world driving champion.
Alan Jones, 2nd row of the grid, and with your teammate in front of you, are there team orders in this race?
No, not at the moment, but that will evolve during the race. We'll just have to see how it all pans out, but I think initially we'll just go for a race. Strategically,
a very interesting race. You could get through on 1 stop.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we'll just have to see how things... But, you know, you can never really plan these races. Everyone says, I think it'll be in the sort of 15s or 16s, and you race a lot quicker, or you anticipate racing a lot quicker, and it turns out to be a lot slower. So the reason I say that is we play it by ear and just do our fuel strategy accordingly.
You've brought David Parsons back into the team. He doesn't have race miles under his belt. How is he on times compared to you?
He's terrific. I mean, David comes out of the woodwork every year for Sandown and Bathurst and does a great job.
So, do you take the lead drive today?
Yeah, I'm starting, and then David, and then I guess me. So, you know, as I said before, David does a terrific job. He always hands the car back in great condition. And as a co-driver, really, you couldn't ask for better.
But he's about a second off your pace in practice. Now, can you afford to give away that second in the race?
Oh, well, in practice, you know, I had new tyres and, you know, I was going for a qualifying run. So I think during the race we'll be lapping fairly similar, I would imagine.
It's a sprint or a long distance slope along?
Both. It's a long-distance sprint. I think the days of having to nurse your car and plan this and plan that and do slow gear changes and early braking and all that sort of bit, that's all finished now. These cars are so similar in times. I mean, you've only got to look at the grid sheet to see how close we all are. It really now is a 500-kilometre sprint.
He was absolutely sensational in the opening laps of Bathurst last year in the wet, reminding us why. He was a world champion racing driver. In front of him on the grid is his team leader, the man that was fighting until the last round, until the completion at Oran Park just a few weeks ago for this year's Australian Touring Car Championship, Glenn Seaton, and his co-driver, Alan Gross.
Glenn, had you expected the Falcon to be as fast as it is, given the aerodynamic difficulties?
I expected them to be on the pace, that's for sure, because around here it's not really an aerodynamic circuit, and that's where they've trimmed the front spoiler, which just makes much faster through high-speed corners, and there's only a couple of high-speed corners here, which is noticeable. There's more understeer in the car.
Over 500 kilometres, will you have a difficulty?
We don't know yet. I haven't done enough miles on tyres to see if it's going to deteriorate or what, so today's going to be pretty hard work, I suppose, as well as trying to keep the Commodores behind, as well as trying to keep the tyre life up, and hopefully it won't hurt us.
You've employed to drive with you a man who's driven with probably every leading team in Australia, Alan Grice. How's he going in the car?
No, great. Alan's fit in with the team very well, and he's also driving the car well, and he's got a lot of experience, which is great to bring to the team.
Alan, you've driven, as I say, for just about every major team in Australia. How does this one compare to the others you've been with? For example, Johnson last year.
Oh, it's obviously a first-grade team. The crew get on well together. The car's a complete package. And one of the really good things is Glenn and I are very similar size, so we don't have to move seats or change belts or any of that sort of stuff on a driver change, and you know that saves some vital seconds.
Well, given in fact that it's going to be about a 23-second stop, and maybe you'll get away with one only, getting Grice into the car is very important.
There's no chance we're going to get away with one stop. We're definitely going to do two. But yeah, it is very important. I think today's pace car is going to play a very vital role to this race, and we'll be playing our cards close to our chest if the pace car comes out.
Alan Grice was funny there. He looked at for a while as though he's off in another land, and suddenly, looked up and he was involved. Those guys, Grice and Seaton, but most other people in the field are regular residents of 5-litre V8 touring car racing, but the car in front of them, neither of them are. Greg Murphy, the New Zealander, has been Super 2-litre touring car racing with the Audi Quattros. In fact, he damaged the car fairly badly at Winton Raceway and missed that round, but was in some spectacular racing at Lakeside. The man that's with him, who did such a good job in the V8s at Bathurst last year, but this year has been chasing single-seater drives in Europe and is back to the V8s for the first time since last year at Bathurst. The audacious and very quick young Craig Lowndes on pole position.
And the biggest smile on the face in the pits for the last 24 hours has been that on the face of Craig Lowndes, pole sitter. Craig, win, lose or draw, you feel pretty happy with yourself, don't you?
I feel I've achieved something this weekend. Hopefully on the race we can have a problem-free race. Obviously the team that has no problems through the race is going to be up the front at the end. You
proved last year that you give no quarter to any of the established names, but do you feel daunted by any of them?
To start with, I was looking up to them. I've always looked up to names of Brock, Jim Richards, Larry Perkins, some of the guys there that I've always looked up to. Now actually driven with Brock. Brock's a great mentor. He's helped me enormously at Bathurst last year. I wouldn't have been able to go finish where I was without Brock. And the other guys, Brad and Thomas last year, they were great. They gave me the on-circuit information I needed to know. But now, I think this year I've been concentrating on my fitness side of it. Obviously, everybody knows I spent a lot of time in the car, so I think it's paying off. Yeah.
Is there anyone you fear?
I've looked through the year. I've watched the touring cars through the year. I know the Falcons get off the line pretty well, so I'm a little bit worried at Seaton at the moment because I haven't had a great deal of starts. I'm hoping I can get a good start. I'm not sure on the Johnson team whether Bow starts or not. No, we know Bow's been quick all year, so those two are the ones that I'm sort of in the back of my mind, but not really playing on my mind.
The shot at Sandown, and it's a tremendous scene, a circuit with enormous atmosphere, because that grandstand really does add to the excitement, the sense of occasion for the drivers. You see Ford and Holden people here, senior executives entertaining their VIP guests as the field now gets underway, and the aspirations of both companies riding with these drivers. 6 Holdens, 6 Fords in the top 12 of them within 1 second of each other, an all V8 field of 21 cars and 3.1 kilometres of Sandown racetrack. Howard Marsden, you've been here in a very different role years ago, and in many ways not much has changed.
No, it hasn't. The pressure's there. Everybody's really worried about what they've done. The mechanics are concerned. Have they actually done everything up? Is the car correct? The team manager's concerned about tyre wears, brakes. The drivers are worried about making a mistake. Everybody's nervous at the moment, Will.
Well, you could say of 21 cars, there'd be at least 10 people for every car. And now it's 21 people out on their own, isn't it? I mean, suddenly all the backup and so on counts for nothing. It's driver against driver and how their car is fettled, whether it's ready to go. And as I said before, I think some of the highlights in the early laps might be the pressure the senior people will try and put on Craig Lowndes, the pace of the senior people behind, the keenness of the new touring car champion John Bow, and the winner with his teammate Dick Johnson of the 12-hour race for Mazda last weekend. Stephen Johnson watching there with Dick. And Ross Stone and his brother Jim, they let a car down on him yesterday in the garage. And suddenly there was a shriek from underneath the car, and they hit the hydraulics again to send it up. He was underneath it when it hit the floor, Jim Stone. Larry Perkins will be in with him today, as with a number of other cars, and indeed several cameras in each of the cars. And this is a moment where even the best race drivers wonder why they're doing it, because it really is a very tense time.
I think what we should do is set a little bit of a scene here. We're expecting most of the cars, in fact, to have 2 stops, virtually 55 laps, fuel stop, driver change, about the same distance, fuel and driver again and go in. So really 3 races. Now, what's important here is, in fact, the tyre wear war. We've got Bridgestone, we've got Dunlop, and we've got Yokohama. They're trying long-distance tyres. They're running for Sandown. They're going to run them at Bathurst as well. But the same tyres, in fact, have already done most of the practice period. So can they go to this first 55-lap stop is what we're all going to start to find out very quickly.
Jim Richards and Fred Gibson. Fred Gibson got a 3rd here years ago as a driver. Never managed to win the race. But his team has. And now lined up on the front row of the grid. Commodore Falcon. 2nd row, Falcon. Next row, 2 Commodores. Next row, 2 Falcons. Next row, 2 Commodores. It's even. It'll be furiously fast. And 560 horsepower in each car, waiting to unleash. It's underway for the 30th time at Sandown, and it's a much better start from Glenn Seaton than it is from Craig Lowndes. Unless Lowndes is very sharp, he'll go into 2nd. He's already tucking in behind and saying, that's good enough for me. A bump between Larry Perkins and Alan Jones, and Perkins goes back to about 6th. But it's Glenn Seaton from Lowndes, from Alan Jones. So Falcon, Commodore Falcon. Larry Perkins sandwiched in behind the Mark Scaife car. That's... You see Longhurst in the Castrol Falcon there further back, and the whole field storming through. And Lowndes wants the lead, and he's got it over the back. So he talked to... He's gone! He's got it again! And he's regathered it. Craig Lowndes, we talked about pressure being put on him by other drivers. He's putting it on himself.
He is, and this is first lap. Somebody from the pits must be screaming at him to slow down and look after this car to bring it home in 2 or 3 hours' time, not at the end of the first lap.
Well, he's keen to make it a race.
Everybody's standing in the pits. There's been a scream as the Commodore went through, but it's the Falcon coming through first on the first lap.
The grandstands erupting with flags, with cheers, with yelling, with people on their feet as they come through in the order of Seaton from Lowndes, from Alan Jones, Peter Brock, Mark Scaife, Larry Perkins, Wayne Gardner, John Bowe started in 7th, he's in 8th, Charlie O'Brien, Tony Longhurst, Brad Jones in 11th place. And that was a 1:21 standing lap, a gap of 1.2 seconds between Seaton and Craig Lowndes in 2nd place. But he's still perhaps a little bit more composed, perhaps a little bit better under control. He's going again for the lead. Craig Lowndes in the Holden. Alongside this time. He'll want to get further in front to make any use of that because he's on the wrong side. You need to be on the left down there. So Lowndes is prepared to put pressure on these experienced drivers.
It certainly looks as though Lowndes has got a faster package at the moment than Seaton. Again, is he under instructions to go out and dominate the race from the front? It'll be interesting to see if he continues to attack young Seaton.
And interesting, Nigel Greenway, Bridgestone tyres, 1, 2, 3 and 4 at the moment. Talked of tyre war. Scaife, Fred Gibson team Yokohama, and Larry Perkins and such, and the Johnson team Dunlops. So at the moment it's Bridgestone's at the front. Seaton, Lowndes, Alan Jones. Boy, you're mixing in heavy company. Craig Lowndes, and you look superbly confident, and you're quick, and you're obviously happy in the car, prepared to have a go. Peter Brock, Mark Scaife, Larry Perkins behind. John Bowe, 7th now. Gardner back to 8th. Charlie O'Brien, Tony Longhurst. Tail end of the field, Ian Palmer. On board with Brock. You're in 4th place. Hope you're enjoying this lounge room ride in car 05. There.
Looking relaxed. And of course, Peter's always been a person who can judge a car's ability to run at a pace and quite often come home in first place. So he's watching all the youngsters get the blood out of the system, settling in a nice position. And let's see how Brock unfolds his race for us.
Over the top 10, there's 5 seconds at the moment. At the end of the last lap, 2 laps completed, now 3. 0.58 of a second from Seaton, the leader, to Lowndes in 2nd place. 1.2 further back to Alan Jones in 3rd. It's only 0.3 of a second, a tad under, to Brock in 4th place. Skate's not far behind them either by 0.5 of a second. Then it's Perkins, Bow, 7th. He'd worked up to that a little bit earlier. Gardner, O'Brien, Longhurst.
Development of these cars year by year is quite interesting. Here they are circulating at a long-distance race at about the same time as the lap record of last year.
Yes, and looking back from Brock's car to Mark Scape in 5th. 3 laps covered. They're on their 4th. Lowndes still wants the lead. He wants to get out and see his own clear air, pick his own lines at braking points, not to be dominated, to be dictated to by Glenn Seaton. And a 13.79 is a lap record for Glenn Seaton. The lap record was John Bow, 1:13.8, set here in 94. He'd actually done a 12.8 in qualifying in 95 and a 12.3 on Friday in 95, but a new lap record in a long-distance race against a sprint race of a year ago.
A fair amount of brake locking going on here. Remember, these tyres have already done qualifying and they have to try to get through to this first fuel and driver and tyre change. So it's interesting that it's the 2 youngsters out in the front and the 2 not so young people in 3rd and 4th position.
And the interesting thing to me is that Craig Lowndes is a man with ambition, and I don't think his crew's going to be able to stop him. But, you know, he's confident, he's brash, he's got something to prove, and he wants to prove it. And it'll end in one of 2 ways. Glorious failure or glorious success.
He is certainly making Seaton lock those wheels every single time. So there's obviously the kudos of leading the race, and that Commodore wants it over the Falcon.
Lowndes is not interested in conservatism. He's interested in making a race, going for the front, doing everything he can. And up against him is a man who hasn't won Bathurst, but he's won the Touring Car Championship, a vastly experienced and good, clean driver, Glenn Seaton, in the Peter Jackson car number 30. Coming around to complete 5 laps. A new lap record to Seaton out in front. I'll have a little bet, Howard Marsden. Here's an audacious one from me. If Lowndes can hit the lead, he'll lower Seaton's lap record.
And you won't get any money from me, I'm afraid, on that bit, Will.
He wants to travel quicker than he's being allowed to at the moment. He just can't find the way through.
Jones is just staying off the pair of them, just watching, because if these 2 do have a coming together, they'll take one another off, and Jones is just far enough off to avoid any problems that might happen.
Jones is probably thinking, yeah, I was that brave when I was young. This looks more serious, but not quite good enough. Couldn't find it. And look how confident he is, even when he's braking with 2 wheels on the dirt, and he forced Glenn Seaton to lock again. This is, whilst it's daring stuff by Lowndes, it's very good. Seaton is working his car far harder than he wants to.
And again, compare the Seaton car to the Jones car behind it. Jones is looking after the car, being able to look after the car a little bit better, because again, Brock is just off. Jones are not pushing.
Again, Alan Jones is probably saying, I think I could make a conservative decision here and look after the team better than running the same sort of race. But Glenn's been forced to run, he's lost the lead. And at lap 7, he's gone off, he's out of the race. He's in the kitty litter, and he won't get out of it. And I said glorious success or glorious failure. And Craig Lowndes has learnt something.
And I tell you what, his pit crew have learned something else as well. They've obviously decided that the boy must go and must go hard, but a wrong decision's been made on a long-distance race.
And I was wrong in one regard. He didn't set a new lap record. He didn't get enough time. Let's look at how it happened. The hotheads become cool. Jumped out from the slipstream. He was very close to Seaton. And watch him under brakes. Oh, he had no hope. He had none. Locked up all the way. He got off the mare. He wanted to roll through, but it wouldn't go, and it came round on him. And there it will stay. So we've had two race leaders. It was Glenn Seaton for 6 laps, and it became Glenn Seaton again after only a few seconds from Alan Jones, Peter Brock, the Fred Gibson team car, Larry Perkins, John Bow. They all motor by, and the shrewd heads nod their heads and say, So they all move up one, but still no storming from car 17, John Bow. The car that won it last year. They're in 6th place at the moment, and Alan Jones is closer now. Glenn Seaton under his own terms and with his own comfort zone. Car 7, Wayne Gardner 7th, Charlie O'Brien 8th, Longhurst 9, Brad Jones 10th, car number 4.
Interesting now to see what the lap times come down to. It looks as though they're going to go into the middle 14s up to 1 minute 15 maybe. We won't see tyre lock-up from Seaton at the front now. He's achieved what he wanted to, which is to lose the sprint Holden, and now everybody's going to settle down.
It's twice as far from where Craig Lowndes parked the car to John Smales in the pits. It'll be a while before he sees Craig Lowndes, but he does have Holden Racing Team with him, John Smales.
And Jeff Gretsch, were you right in letting Lowndes have a go like that?
Well, it's a race. I mean, the pace is fairly demanding. He made a mistake. He obviously went in too deep under brakes, but you know, everyone makes a mistake, even the old guys. So, you know, okay, it's one that he'll put in his memory book for Bathurst, and hopefully he won't do it again. But all credit to him. I mean, he made that one mistake, but all week he's put in nothing but the best effort possible, and so is his co-driver Greg. So I guess he got a lot to think about for now, Bathurst, and hopefully they won't do that again.
What did you say to him after his first off on lap 1?
Nothing really, because you can't afford the drivers at the wheel. If you intervene and try and drive the car for them, you can do more damage than good. So, you know, obviously the first lap, you know, the adrenaline's on the rush, and you've got to let them settle down at their own pace, which he had, and he was obviously in a hurry. He wanted to get in front of Glenn, who was holding him up, but he made a mistake. So that's the bottom line.
A lot of psychology to be done with him between now and Bathurst.
Oh no. Well, yes and no. I guess, as I said, he's not the only one that makes a mistake. There's a lot of other drivers, a lot of other races. It's just hopefully it'll go into memory bank for next time. Okay, cheers.
Howard Marsden, you've been a team manager, and you're shaking your head a little bit. Perhaps not enough firmness, old wisdom onto the young boy?
Yeah, I'm an older team manager. I've been there and done that, and opinions do change. But as far as I'm concerned, a driver is a high-speed chauffeur. He's paid to do a job, and he should be told what that job is, and regularly. And it's a shame to see talent like young Craig being allowed to make a mistake. And I think it's a shame for Lowndes. He'll get the blame, but in fact for me, the pit crew did not do their job on that occasion.
Because he was almost being endorsed there in having thrust that hard. Glenn Seaton now, have a look at the experience of these guys. They're doing 14 8s and 7s, Alan Jones, Glenn Seaton, Brock. They were being forced into hot 13s, 13 8s, a second faster by a young man not used to the car. I mean, it's all very brave and great stuff to watch. I wish it had gone on.
The other thing that I'm watching these two cars run together now, and I'm a little bit concerned that Seaton is still locking that left-hand front wheel. Jones's car seems to be better set up and a much better balance, and they were running too close together. Maybe they'll separate and settle out, but Jones looks as though he's the faster of the two cars on the day.
Because it was said of Craig Lowndes last year when he went to Bathurst that the Holden team mightn't be the best spot for him in terms of looking after him and just patting him a little bit, keeping him cool, calm, settling ambition against experience.
most important thing is that he's 21 years old and he's absolutely full of talent. It's a great thing for Australian sport that there's somebody like this young lad who's very calm, is a very charming young man, got the talent, he'll go a long way. He does need his hand-holding.
As we go aboard with the Australian touring car champion in 6th place, John Bowe, looming up onto the tail end of Larry Perkins. Have a look at the style of the champ. Great stuff to watch. Larry Perkins in front, and these people know these cars, know this sort of racing, know what you can do, what is the comfort zone. For all that people say, oh, they're 500k sprints, they can't sprint them the way they sprint a touring car championship round. Physically, the drivers can't do it. The cars can't do it mechanically. You couldn't keep your head up to it, could you, Howard Marsden?
No, you can't. The pressures are too much. Plus, in fact, funnily enough, the track won't allow it to happen. The track gets oily and greasy. Rubber is rolled off the front of these tyres and distributed just offline. The cars can't hold these sorts of speeds, and already we're seeing the time starting to fall back.
And the sort of thing you might expect from a Ford Falcon driver at the moment in their first race, in their new aerodynamic form, which is all under the car. You can't see any of the 200 millimetres that's been removed from the front of the Falcons. It's tucked back under the car, literally between the front wheels. But John Bowe not happy with the way the front end of car 17 working.
So what they've done is to change the control of the air under the front of the car and in fact brought back a little bit more lift at the front of the vehicle. Now that lift takes pressure off the front tyres. The tyres don't grip as well and you get slide when the cars are going through the corners, which is called understeer.
There's a tractor coming in to remove Craig Lowndes' Holden Racing Team car from the sandpit down there. There's a yellow flag waving. It means therefore slowing, no passing, and it should compress Glenn Seaton with Alan Jones with Peter Brock running 1, 2, 3. Mark Scape in 4th, Perkins, Bowe, Gardner, Longhurst, Brad Jones and Charlie O'Brien. There's a forward move by Brad Jones in car 4 over O'Brien back to 10th as he was earlier, but then picked up 9th with Craig Lowndes out. He's in car 18, the backup Shell FAI race team car.
To see the Gardner car being more sedately run, I think, this year, settled down into a time. It's in that top 10 slot, and I think they're taking their mark off the more experienced cars ahead of them.
So to have a look at it at the moment, the Falcons that allegedly aren't working and won't turn into a corner are running 1, 2. Commodores are running 3, 4, 5. Falcon 6, Commodore 7 with Gardner, Longhurst Falcon 8. Brad Jones Commodore and Charlie O'Brien Falcon. So they're distributed among the top 10 pretty evenly.
I think the next move that's starting to come up, I think John Bowe is starting to get closer to Larry, and he's going to make a move on Larry, is my guess, over the next few laps.
The gap is closing 1st to 6th, but one of the reasons it would be is that the fastest of the top 8 drivers in the last lap was the race leader, Glenn Seaton. He did a 15. And he's just done a 15.05. He previously did a 15.1. Alan Jones a 14.8. Peter Brock a 14.9. And Lowndes driving the car from the tractor. He's on the track. Sandy, dusty looking thing it is too. And heading back round towards the pits. Now they're allowed to move a car, Howard Marsden, that's in a perilous position. They're allowed to get assistance to move it. So does that allow him to get back to the pits to resume racing?
Back to the pits, yes, but resume racing, no. So we've seen the last of them if they stick with the regulations.
He's currently 8 laps down. Therefore the race has covered 13 completed. They're on their 14th, and he went off in glorious style. It was a great lose, and it was a great cut and thrust for the lead, and tremendous stuff. And, you know, this is the delicate thing about race driving. You need all of what he's got, but you've got to tame the feather edge of it, haven't you? You mustn't take away the ambition, the willingness to live on the edge.
This sport of ours is no different to any other sport. If it was a footballer or a cricketer, you'd expect him to do wonderful things and then make glorious mistakes. But as he does his miles, as he does his runs, as he does his tennis playing, he gets better and better. And this is what he will learn here in our sport.
John Bowe said this year he learned how to race better in the Touring Car Championship and to race for the championship better than he's individually raced events this year or in past years. Looking at Wayne Gardner in 7th place. He'll be sharing that car with Neil Crompton. And up closer to Mark Scaife.
In fact, they're all closing up, because what is happening is that Seaton is not pushing his car quite so hard. And that's the move that we were talking about before. Bow is through on Larry. You can see him starting to wind the car up. He's looked after the car. Now he's going to slowly start to move his way, I believe, all the way through to the front of the race. It's exactly what he did last year. Very intelligent driving from John.
So Larry Perkins, another onboard camera, looking at the touring car champion John Bow, who's just gone beside him or through and taken up 5th place. Larry's gone to 6th. Larry was quickest in the qualifying session yesterday, but in the runoff didn't quite get it together, nor did Mark Scaife. Craig Lowndes did, and so that's why Larry's down in 6th at the moment, wanting better than that, because it represents 4.8 seconds. All gone out to 15s now from a 13.8, which is the new lap record set by Glenn Seaton early in the race, and we reckon that Craig Lowndes wanted to do quicker ones than that. Certainly did. He proved it to us. So still the Peter Jackson team of Glenn Seaton not only running 1-2 in the race as Mark Scaife in car number 1 in 4th place runs the fastest lap of the race just a moment ago. This is with Paul Romano. Further down in the field, in 15th place in fact, but important for Glenn Seaton some results, because he's looking for replacement sponsorship, and the cars, who knows what colour they'll be. Glenn Seaton doesn't. There's Romano in the company he's keeping, which is Mark Larkham just in front of him. You saw the Mitre 10 car, and David Parsons just a little way behind. His father, Bap, who raced sports cars years ago, said to me this morning, "Look at me." And he's got this new uniform, and it's all smart and everything. And then an official came up and he said, "Who's your appointed fire marshal?" And Bap said, "I am." He said, "Well, you weren't standing there with an extinguisher at that refuel." Oh, so Bap's smile disappeared from his face very rapidly. And you suddenly realised how safety conscious everybody in motorsport is. And if you're a newcomer and you come in, a newcomer in a new role, Bap, then you can't relax for a moment. You've got to be totally serious, totally professional. This is his son, Paul, who qualified so well for the final round of the Touring Car Championship at Oran Park, but then got touched, and round he went in the middle of a very quick field very early on, and survived that and continues racing. And Bap says, "I'd better keep building houses so Paul can continue racing." Running 15th. Steve Reed, Trevor Ashby running car number 3. They're in 13th place at this stage, with the Mark Larkham car in behind. And then Paul Romano. As we go down to the pits to Ian Campbell. Gee, that was tight for a moment there as Mark Larkham was getting adventurous. Gives us time now, though, to go to Ian Campbell.
Thanks, Will. The update on the Lowndes affair is that he has been assisted from that area. However, the officials deem he was removed for safety and not with outside assistance, and will be able to continue in the race.
So, there you go. 8 laps down.
There are rules and interpretations.
Yes, I had an interesting discussion with Harry Firth yesterday about various discussions about rules in recent times and things that have changed as we look at the leading pair now. But he talked about the time. He was talking about Peter Brock. I said, "Tell me about when you brought Peter Brock in 1969 into Holden Dealer Team, HDT." And he said, "Well, there was this young guy, bearded he was. This is the guy now all clean-shaven and Mr. Smooth and Mr. Presentable, bearded. What was the speed shop that he ran for? I forget the name of it. The something or other speed shop from out of Melbourne." And he said he's driving this Austin A30. It was a horror. And he said, "I reckon anybody who could drive that car could drive anything." And he said, "I had other people drive the cars for me, and they weren't doing what I wanted them to do in the car and the way the cars needed to be driven." And he said, I need somebody who I can get to drive the cars the way." In other words, they haven't had enough experience in other things. So he said, "I rang this guy," and he said, he didn't take me seriously. He said, "You're joking." This is the guy we're talking about, Peter Brock. This is 1969. And Harry said, no, I'm serious, listen to me. He said, I want you to come round here and have a talk to me. And so he came and had a talk, and he just talked then of the development of the Brock career, of an early marriage which he felt was detrimental to his racing and didn't fit in well. His wife Belinda Green, the Miss Australia at the time, didn't like motorsport or understand it, and Peter got distracted in terms of arriving at meetings on time and things like that, and Harry got smart, took him overseas and devised a race program for him in Macau and other places to get him away on his own to think about his racing and so on. But it was really interesting because there was no question that Harry Firth, I think you'd agree, Howard Marsden, was the guy that brought Brock through and took an enormous amount of natural talent. And here we're talking about a repeat in the early days of Craig Lowndes, and took this natural talent and moulded it.
That's exactly the point. That's the point I was making before, that Lowndes has got similar types of talent to the young Brock, same sorts of ages, and we need somebody strong in the pits to say to Lowndes, this is what we want you to do, and this will take you forward, and this will get you winning races for our team.
Because there's no question you can go in the wrong way.
Meanwhile, whilst that conversation's going on, of course, we've got Brock slowly coming onto the back of the Fords. Jones is now looking to possibly and in fact definitely go through on his team leader, which might have let Brock through as well. No, just held him out. So Glenn won't be too happy about that particular move, but it's a move that has been due for some time. Jones is faster today than is Seaton for various reasons, and Jones needs to get out there and get going.
And he's got out there to the extent of getting on towards a second at the end of the lap. Brock wanted his way down the inside, and so too did Mark Scaife in 1. So suddenly Commodores want to get among the Falcons. Falcons 1-2, Commodores 3-4. In fact, and then Falcon 5, Commodore 6. So to run through it, it's Alan Jones from Seaton, from Brock Scaife, Bow and Larry Perkins, Wayne Gardner, 7th, still in 7. Tony Longhurst, Brad Jones and Charlie O'Brien. And there they are.
And here comes John Bow, as we were saying earlier on. He's gradually working his way up, and he's on to the front group just about now. And I think we have to predict that Bow's going to work that car up into that 50th or 55th lap pit stop, and he's going to be very close to the lead at the time it happens, if all goes well.
Seaton going out to a 16.6. They'd been in the 14s a moment ago. All 4 cars, other than the 16.6 for Seaton, are in the 15s at the moment, 1 minute 15-second laps. And just as the grandstand erupted when the underdog, the young man, Craig Lowndes, went for the lead, and then moments later sat down in despair and disappointment at what they knew was going to be an audacious, a cheeky, a hard race. They're waiting for this man to come through, and if this man can come forward one or one more, Jones got locked up there like Lowndes, but he had a more ideal entry to the corner, and he wasn't pressured by another car in his way, but he had a moment.
Certainly did. Certainly did.
But if Brock can come forward, then the crowd will be on its feet. He's the Melbourne hero.
Yeah, I think you're looking at Bow and Brock, who are really using their head at the moment and seeing this for what it is. They have to be competitive. Nowadays, you have to be up with a fast group of cars. You've still got to look after the car to bring it home into the number of pit stops that are required. So I think that Jones will tend to want to get away from Seaton a little bit, and Seaton will protect his back from the other cars.
This is a very heady little bunch up at the front end of the field. There is, over the lot of them, 2.5 seconds over 5 cars. And Mark Scaife is in 4th place in 1. So we're looking at him through the rear end of Brock's car, 05. On the bumper bar of Brock. 1st place Jones, 2nd place Seaton, 3rd place Brock. Scaife, John Bow.
See, Bow's just coming up, just parts of a second per lap. No locking up, nice and clean.
And 2.3 seconds over 5. And
there's Jones trying to take a break from everybody else. Seaton holding position. The other 3 cars behind closing up on Seaton, and they'll tend to have a bit of a bun fight, all of them trying to get through on Seaton.
Down in the pits is Ian Campbell. He's certainly down there, but I don't think he can hear us at the moment. But now we're ready. Ian Campbell in the pits.
Thanks, Will. Unscheduled, the Palmer Peters Hungry Jacks team have come in for their first service. They've changed drivers. They're accepting the fact that the car is missing, and also they have handling problems. They're also rectified some of that, but unfortunately they're accepting the fact that this will now have to be a practice for Bathurst.
Great motor racing statistician Nigel Greenway, from whom I get the information. Note on a piece of paper here, pole position hasn't won this race since Brock was on pole and won it in 1980. Craig Lowndes has proved it again. It's given it another year. So that Glenn Seaton in second place at the moment. But I'm fascinated, Howard Marsden, by that spread over 5 cars, 2.75 seconds. You go out then, nearly 4 seconds, 3.8. Perkins in 6th place in car 11. Not far from him, it's only 6/10 to Gardner, but it's 8 seconds then to Longhurst in 8th place. It is 9 seconds then to Brad Jones in 9th, and just 1 back to Charlie O'Brien in 10th place in the second Shell team car from Dick Johnson, car number 18.
I had to make a bet about Perkins. I think Larry, again, a great thinking driver, has decided what is the lap time that's going to bring him home at the end of the race in very good condition. I think it'd be interesting to see Larry, if he has a straight run without any troubles, move up onto these blokes through the various pit stops.
Because Larry has made some late race bursts in this race and some races for the lead that have been absolutely marvellous. He had a race one year, if you remember, where he had a half lose and lost the lead, or lost his challenge for the lead, and 2nd, 3rd and 4th place in really close company. Going out by a second and a half is the race leader, Alan Jones, after just over 30 minutes of racing, 24 laps covered. We'll be back at Sandown very shortly. At Sandown as we welcome you back. And it's Alan Jones with a margin of 2.37. Went out from 1.9 the previous lap to and 1.6 the one before that. So Alan Jones has got the skates on now in car number 35. It was interesting there to look at a lap time a couple of laps ago. He had a 14.89.05. Craig Lowndes 21st and 8 laps behind, a 14.89.13. 8 ten-thousandths of a second between them. He can run hard and fast, as we saw earlier. You see there the top 10 positions, and the situation opening out at tad as Glenn Seaton is really fending off probably Peter Brock, Mark Scaife, John Bowe. We'll talk to you about the number 2 driver situation as we come down the bottom end of the circuit. And car number 20, Ian Palmer, was running in 20th place, last but Lowndes. And this is what happened. Down the bottom, they're hard on the brakes and meant to be square. They need to be square. He was aiming straight ahead. And he turned okay, and everything was all right, except that David Attard was in the way in car number 49. And Attard did a very good job, both of helping him round, but also of avoiding him. A very good job. Could have T-boned him, but left him there very cleanly indeed, and motored on his way. Attard, who was a standout as a privateer in the Touring Car Championship, traipsing all around Australia, spending lots of money and going very well. There's a 14.83 for Craig Lowndes. Nobody in the top 10. A few have bet at are in the 15s, and 3 are in the 16s, and Craig Lowndes is in the 14.8s, because if he's to drive to make up 8 laps, I mean, he can't get there. Wouldn't get there by Wednesday.
That's right. He's out there practicing now, trying various things, pushing the car to see what will break, ready for Bathurst.
It's a very good give the car some hell and see if it breaks exercise, as well as Craig Lowndes running quickly and trying to do it without error.
Now, the big change since we've come back from the commercial break, of course, is they're starting to get into the back markers. This will upset the rhythm and balance of the teams as to their luck as to when they come across these people. But still, the position at the front is about the same, with Jones away and Seaton really protecting him from Brock, Scaife and Bow, who are all running reasonably close.
3 seconds the buffer. Alan Jones back to his teammate Glenn Seaton. Teammate, boss, team owner. And looking for his first win at Bathurst, Glenn Seaton, on a $30,000 or an old Ford Cortina bonus if he can win at Bathurst. Age 30 years since Father Beau, Barry, run there, 1965 in a GT 500 Cortina. I was talking of Harry Firth earlier, and Harry was the designer, if you like, the cobbler up of the GT 500 Cortina, whose main feature was 2 fuel fillers and a very big tank in the boot. The other thing about the interesting early days of Brock and Harry Firth was that one of the people helping Brock with his Diamond Valley speed shop, Austin A30, I've remembered it, and that fastest lap on lap 3 remains the quickest lap of the race and a new lap record, was that Rachel Splatt's father, the current female drag racer who's doing such a good job, and I think going to Japan or gone recently, her father was working and helped Brock cobble together that Austin A30. Pace car is out. Now, for those interested in the 12-hour at Eastern Creek, they'll be interested in how this works, because that was a thing of great contention to do with Eastern Creek. I don't agree with all of the contention, but nevertheless, the leaders forming up behind the pace car, the field compressing, and down in the pits we go.
David Addard has come into the pits, and unfortunately for him, before the pace car went out, he has severe structural damage to the front left. Also, the steering arm is bent, apparently as a result of contact with the Palmer car out on the circuit. They're desperately trying to get the All Care car up and running and back before we go into green here at Sandown.
Interesting, could be a pit stop. Certainly the option of taking it now, but it will muck up their strategy, Howard Marsden.
Right, obviously Brock is adjusting the headgear, he's checking in the mirror that all looks well, having a drink at the same time. Ah, there's the steering wheel. I knew there was something else I had to do. However, the teams have the option now of coming in quickly, taking some fuel on, maybe changing tyres early, and then getting back out before the pace car comes round on another occasion. They are then allowed to quickly join up to the back of the queue behind that space.
This car, Ashby and Reed, car number 3, in 14th place when they decided to pit. You're a team manager. We'll take you out of the commentary box down there with a headset and pit lane. Would you call your cars in now?
No, I think it's too early. It'll upset the whole balance and rhythm of the place. I would expect more of these accidents. I'd expect more pace cars out, and I'd look for taking my opportunity later in the race meeting.
So Peter Brock looked as though he was disconnecting something for a stop, but might have been rearranging a torque line around the helmet, or indeed that drink line. But the pit lane closed now, and in comes, was it a Holden Racing Team car?
I missed that, Will.
Certainly, yes. Lowndes Murphy. Well, the funny thing was, I was thinking that they could pull up a better part of a lap on the tail end of the field.
But they need to do that 8 times, so possibly they can't be that lucky. So they'll be trying tyres now.
If he wanted to get really cheeky, he could always try and blast past a few people who are suddenly on a different agenda. And, you know, you might be able to get up in the middle of the field again and have a go at them, even if you're not making much progress, really. As you say, they've got to do it 8 times.
Yeah, that's right.
It's an incredible task. So...
Now, what's also interesting here, of course, is that these slow laps, they're using a different amount of fuel to the laps that they're using when they are racing. So it does tend to upset that total calculation of how much fuel is in the car, because some of the cars are talking about at the end of the race. We've spoken about there being 2 main pit stops, but some of them are concerned that right at the end of the race they might have to run in and just take half a can of fuel onto the cars. Now, if they can avoid that by having a number of slow laps like this, conserving fuel, there may be an opportunity to miss out on that last-minute rush in for fuel.
Incidentally, when you look at the times, they're only, I say only, but still seems half respectable 2 minutes 20-second laps under the pace car, and yet they look as though they're going to the supermarket to buy bread.
It is interesting because you're running slowly, you're expecting to run less fuel, but the way in fact these cars are set up and the electronic fuel control systems, quite often because they're running slowly, they're running under cam, they're running at low levels of efficiency, they can use nearly as much fuel on a slow lap as they do on a full wide open throttle.
And they'd have to be in a lower gear too, wouldn't they?
Oh yes they are, but really it's a matter of where the fuel is tuned to be going in, but it can be that the fuel saving is not quite as much as people expect.
In the distance there, the Ian Palmer car being removed, and that was the car that was running in 20th out of 21 places. And pleasing to me that they didn't bring the Thomas Mazira into the Brock car, so we may well have forecast correctly that he was undoing the helmet communication. So not only a pit stop for Brock, but a driver change, and contrary to what Howard Marsden would have recommended or done himself, 33 laps now completed. The pace car coming out on lap 32. So the order: Alan Jones from Seaton, from Scaife, Bow, and that's the car that Dick Johnson will take over. Larry Perkins, Wayne Gardner becomes 6th. Longhurst, Brad Jones, Tony Scott, Mark Larkham comes into the top 10. Romano Brock, 12th place now. So back there in 12th place, 05, Thomas Mazira now, a job to do. And they won't be able to do an enormous amount about it. They won't get 11 of them back between now probably and the first stop, and that could be 20 laps away, close to.
It will be 20 laps, and it'll be very important when the green lights go here now that Mazira in fact takes 2 or 3 of these back markers immediately.
Yes.
It starts to come up onto the faster train as soon as possible.
So suddenly he's in slower company, and it will muck up his lines and his braking points. But let's go down to the pits with John Smales.
And Will, we said it was going to be a lightning fast day today. Well, it is in the pits as well. That Holden Racing team stop, putting Mazira in the car, Brock out, took 15.8 seconds, including 4 tyres and a full tank of gas. That's sensational.
Well,
also had a driver change in the first FAI pits. Charlie O'Brien stepping out the car, Stephen Johnson in. You had an episode out there before. What happened?
Oh, Phil, it was my fault. Just getting used to setting up the brake bias between this morning's empty tank and a full tank in the race. Probably should have done a little bit more testing on that, so it's really my problem. Locked the rear brakes and went around, but it didn't really cost us much. We're just pacing ourselves to finish the race, to get experience for Stephen and I to, driving together.
Does the pace out there surprise you?
I'm really not worried about what pace the front are doing. I'm just sort of concerned with what we're doing and make sure that we get the 18 car to finish.
Charlie O'Brien in for a well-deserved rest. Stephen Johnson in the car.
well, some really interesting and varying strategies here. Brock, a pit and a driver change. Larry Perkins, a pit but no driver change. Charlie O'Brien in the second of the Dick Johnson Shell Team Falcons, the driver change also. And a stop for Craig Lowndes. So Val Johnson, no stop. So 34 laps completed. The race order at this stage, let's just have a look at it. It's Alan Jones from Seaton, from Scaife. Gardner is 4th. Longhurst 5th. Brad Jones 6th. Tony Scott 7th, Larkham 8th, Romano, Paul Romano 9th, Brock now becomes 10th with some pit stops in front of him. Ross Palmer has gone to last, well, Ian Palmer, sorry, car number 20. And look at Gardner's problem right front. He's in 4th place in car number 7, but he's blown a Dunlop. And they're starting to race again.
Terrible luck for Gardner.
Absolutely shocking luck. So while they speed away, and Alan Jones all but goes, all but gone.
Cold tyres.
In front of Glenn Seaton. Mark Scaife with him, saying, all right, boys, Let's start racing again. Longhurst is 4th, Brad Jones, Tony Scott, Clark and Romano, Brock 9th, O'Brien, Bow, Johnson 11th. They did stop. Gardner 12th, but he's still in the pits. Perkins is 13th. Waldock is 14th. So things have really changed, and Neil Crompton goes into the Gardner car, and just incredibly bad luck, undeserved. You just sort of can't understand why it should happen. So Bow in 11th place, Perkins, Gardner 13th at the moment, Waldock, Smurden, Reed, Parsons, Poole, Attard and Lowndes now into 20th place. As the Gardner car resumes, number 7 will give you its place from 13th that it was when it pitted there at the end of the restarted laps. The pace car out on 32, in at 35. They're on their 36th lap now in a 161 lap. 30th running of the Sandown 500. 0.34 of a second between first Alan Jones, second Glenn Seaton, his team boss and owner. It's half a second further back to Mark Scaife. You can see the close company they're in as they battle for first, second and third at the moment. Longhurst is in 4th. The second of the Castrol cars, the Falcon, staying out where Larry Perkins came in. And Longhurst is looking on Mark Scaife for third place to make it Falcons 1, 2, 3. And that's the way it will be, I think. So the Falcons that won't turn in, that are shocking things to drive, first, second and third in the race at this stage. But of course, many, many things to be resolved and to happen between now and race end. And interesting to me is the people in places 1, 2, 3 and 4. Alan Jones 35, Seaton 30, Scaife 1 and Longhurst 25, who didn't pit. Will that be the right strategy or will it be the wrong strategy for such as Brock, who's now in 9th place, Charlie O'Brien behind him 10th, Johnson Bow 11th, Perkins 12th, Gardner. We're waiting for Gardner to come by. And we've got him down in the pits, so while we wait for the car to flash by and to reconfirm its place, let's hear from him in the pits. Wayne Gardner.
And a dreadfully disappointed Wayne Gardner. Wayne, when did the tyre blow? What notice did it give you?
Only on the behind the pace car. I started noticing it was understeer, and I said to Wally, I said, either the temperature's dropped right out of these or I got it flat. And he said, well, I'll just keep going, see if you can get some heat in it, but then it just went flat at the end there, and I tried to wobble around, and it's a real bummer. I mean, just when things started going good, I was harassing Larry, and, you know, Dunlop went flat on me, so there's nothing I could do, and I've just got it home with, as you can probably see, no rubber left on the rim.
Yeah. How did you feel seeing the pace car lights go out knowing that you had a flat?
Not very well, believe me, because the car's running really good, very strong. I was harassing Larry. I didn't want to push Larry too hard because I think we can get him later on, but it's a shame that it happened because the pace of the car's very good and it's feeling really strong.
Thanks, Wayne. The news on Larry Perkins is that he pulled in under the pace car, took a tyre change, went out keeping in the car himself. Then, as Gardner came in, I saw Perkins in the background coming into the pits again for an unscheduled stop. So he's taken 2 stops in the pits.
And Mark Scaife has pitted as well. Gardner is still 13th. And Ian Campbell in the pits with Mark Scaife.
Well, there's a real problem with the Scaife car. He's come into the pits, the engine screaming its head off. It sounded to me like a throttle linkage covered. We're under the cloak of secrecy here. As you can see, they're trying to cover up all the herbs and spices under the bonnet of the Winfield car. But they're certainly with a problem in the pits, have now been here for about 35 seconds.
Howard Marsden, that man looks as though he's covering up the state secrets, didn't you think?
He was. In fact, the Gibson team have been working for the past 6 months purely on airflow to improve the performance of the engine. The others say that they've got well over 600 horsepower, and obviously there are some secrets on airflow that they don't want the opposition to have a look at. But all the airflow, all the work's gone wrong for possibly something very simple.
So, throttle linkage, it appears, in a race where Alan Jones leads Glenn Seaton. Tony Longhurst is third. Scott in car number 6, the Pinnacle Motorsport car that he'll hand over to, trying to see his co-driver, Stephen Ellery, of course, the young privateer that's gone so well in Super 2-litre touring. Was to be John Cleland, the English driver, but he is in 4th place at the moment, ahead of Brad Jones, Mark Larkham. That surely must be the best place that might have 10 cars ever been. It's in 6th at the moment. Brock is now 7th. O'Brien is 8th. Brock is now 6th as he goes ahead of Scott. And then O'Brien, Romano, Bow Johnson up into 10th place. Perkins, Gardner. Gardner comes to 12th. Quite a bit of... So Dick Johnson is in car number 17. And in car number 18, just getting the messages right, car number 18, Dick Johnson in John Bow's car, but also Stephen Johnson. Johnson Jr. is in car number 18 in 8th place. That was Father Dick. And Stephen Johnson in 18 doing a 15.4. Look, have a look at this. Stephen Johnson a 15.3925. Dick Johnson, father, 15.3954. So 29 ten thousandths of a second. 29 ten thousandths between father and son, with son faster.
Mind you, Dickie will tell you that he was held up.
Dick's very relaxed about his situation in motor racing at this stage. 5 times Australian Touring Car Champion, Bathurst winner. Successful team owner. He's now got this team cracking superbly. Back in this Turbo Sierra days were not happy times for him or for Shell. And they had to sharpen up their act both to stay competitive and to retain the sponsorship.
And one thing that happened was one of the Shell managers, Wayne Cattock, came out of the Shell Motor Company to handle the business arrangements of Johnson's team. This allowed Dickie then to concentrate on the car, on his driving, on the mechanical side of the business, and Wayne did the business work for him.
Question mark as to whether the Johnson Bow car 17. Boy, this is some hard racing. Stephen Johnson. And boy, it really is serious stuff around the back there. But as to whether there's a stop-go penalty imminent for car number 17. This is in 8th place, this argument. In fact, it's up into 6th place now. Situation changing constantly as those pit stops iron themselves out and some of the slower cars are fairly briskly overtaken. So let's have a look at it. Alan Jones from Glen Seaton, 0.5 of a second between them. 2 seconds back to Tony Longhurst, still third in the Castrol Falcon, number 25. So Falcon's 1, 2, 3. Brock's the best of the Commodores. He's now 4th in 05, but he's 16 seconds behind the leader, 13 and a half behind Longhurst. 5th place behind him is Stephen Johnson. He's a further 3 seconds in arrears to Brock. So Stephen Johnson in 18 in this real rush at the moment, the car that he's taken over from Charlie O'Brien. Could be out chasing Peter Brock fairly shortly. Brad Jones, Mark Larkham, Tony Scott, John Bow, handing over to Dick Johnson. So 17, Dick Johnson is in 9th place and Paul Romano is in 10th. Here they are, and there were the gaps of the top 5. And as we said earlier, interesting strategic difference between the top 3, Jones, Seaton, Longhurst, who didn't pit, and the others who did. Of course, I suppose if you're sitting up in front, Howard Marsden, it's a bit harder to make that mental decision, saying, I think I'll give this away. I'll go in early, and I hope I gain something out of it. I mean, what can you gain better than being in 1st, 2nd or 3rd?
That's great. You'll take that any time it comes. But it is really a matter of how it's going to now work out. They've come in, a lot of these cars, in the laps 33, 34, 35. That means they've got something like 130 laps to go, and that's not quite halfway, so they can't come home in just one stop from here. So the whole strategy of whether they're going to come for one long stop and then one very short stop at the end is going to be an interesting way this thing does unfold.
Mark Larkham in the Mitre 10 car number 10 in 7th place has this car looming up close to him. Have a look at Dick Johnson in a hurry. There it is, in the gun sight. Up the back straight at Sandown, clunking through the dog box into 5th gear and up off the top. Dick Johnson a little bit squarer than Larkham, who got round there yesterday. He had a bit of a spin. Couple of stabs at the brake by Larkham. And there is a stop-go penalty for Dick Johnston. It's been ordered and it's due. So as he chases Larkham and forces him into a brake lock-up, Will he take his stop-go now? Yes, sir. Watch it. Stop-go. He was threatening for 7th place. Ten seconds. 10 seconds. Dick does not like this sort of stuff. Go.
Evidently coming out from his pit stop, he hit something or some part of the official accoutrement, and they said, come in and do that again, Dickie.
Only a flag marshal, sort of 1.5 with Pike. I don't know what they're worrying about. So here we go. Larry Perkins saying, sorry, Dick, but I'm staying there, boy. As Larry goes by in 11th place, Sir Johnson's 12th. 10 seconds stationary in the pits. Costs you from 7th to 12th. Oh, beautiful shot. You see the front wheel waving in the air, dancing over the ground like a wand, like a conductor's baton. Johnson chasing Larry Perkins. Larry, you remember, made the pit stop. Watch the ripples. Oh, beautiful stuff. Glorious. A Dunlop dance. Look at the constant wheel work. You reckon things are easy in those cars? You reckon it isn't dramatic? Garbage. Hop in and see. You'd be sick in half a lap. The forces, the violence, the noise, the clanking, the clattering is enormous. I've been around Bathurst with Larry and I know. It's not comfortable as a passenger. It's very interesting.
Interesting up the front straight. Johnson's been able to pull past the Larry Perkins car.
Got him.
And obviously got more power than Larry has. Now, Larry is recognised always as being one of the best engine builders, certainly on the Commodore, but the Falcon's got the greater power at this stage.
Larry does have engines and engines, though, and again, people sort of think, oh, the Larry Perkins Commodore, here it is, but the Larry Perkins Commodore in the Touring Car Championship at Auburn Park is very different to it here at Sandown. It'll be very different to it in qualifying at Bathurst, which will be very different to it again in engine and other things, perhaps even gear ratios or final drive to start the race on Sunday at Bathurst.
Exactly right. And Larry's put together a package here that he feels is a winning package, so maybe he's content to see the Falcons go away at this stage, and he'll get them on lap 161.
Well, Larry's just done a 16.3, and that seems to be about the best he can pull out of it at the moment. Paul Romano in front of him in 9th place in car 24, 17.4, although he's just dotted off a 16.8, but still slower than Perkins. So Perkins, as we might expect, with his greater experience and team budget and so on, will be out after him shortly and haul him in. And going out almost to a 17. So again, to recap at this stage, we know the top three, Jones, Seaton, Longhurst, and Brock in 4th. And Charlie O'Brien handing over to Stephen Johnson in 5th place. So Junior running much better than Father, who's in 10th place. Junior in 5th. Brad Jones, Mark Larkham, Tony Scott, Paul Romano. And then out of the top 10, listen to this list. Larry Perkins, Neil Crompton, Smurden, Reed, Waldock, Parsons, Poole, Scaife, Richards in 18th place with that problem in the pits. Lowndes now 19th, and Attard, the privateer, 20th. He's obviously had a problem too.
Yes, he has. Yeah, it's an interesting settling period this far into the race. We've done, nearly 50 laps now, and we're settling into what we almost call the second phase of the race, and we'll start to find out whether those people who decided not to pit have made the right decision by the time we get out to the 50th odd lap.
Attard, of course, his problem that put him back down there in 20th behind Craig Lowndes was the pit stop to rectify his mudguard damage rubbing on the tyre after tangling with Ian Palmer. Within the next 10 laps. The leading trio who didn't pit will have to pit. Peter Brock and Thomas Mazzira, actually at the wheel of 05, had the chance of leading the race. The crowd would love it to be Brock, and they'd love him to surge to the lead past the Falcons, past all the other Commodores, under their noses in the main grandstand, but that probably won't be the way it'll happen if it does indeed. So looking now at Neil Crompton, and a Hagen prediction has come true, because a new lap record belongs to Craig Lowndes. He's done a 7.7. So the previous lap record set by Glenn Seaton, as we see car 4 come in. This is Neil Crompton. How to stuff your day sometimes can be simple as start the race.
I think that's the Brad Jones.
Yes, of course it is.
And
the other one, yep. So in 11th place they were when they decided to pit. So perhaps 40 on the 48th lap. No, that would be their 47th. The leaders are on their 48th. They've completed 47. As if rejoins now. Perhaps it was a scheduled stop.
Yes, at 47 laps, that's a little bit early, but yes, I think it could well have been scheduled. That means he's definitely a lap down now.
Race leader coming through, had a lead of 2.4 seconds. Jones from Longhurst. Sorry, Jones from Seaton. So car 30 you see there is in second place. Here we are, Mazira in third. In fact, not true, because Mazira has Longhurst in the Castrol Falcon in front, and Lowndes, the new lap record holder, let's have a look at the field though. This is the situation. Longhurst in Falcon is in third place, so the best Commodore is Brock Mazira. Thomas driving that car at the moment with O'Brien, and Steve Johnson in fifth. So it's Falcon's 5 of the top 6. The only Commodore there is Mazira. Behind that, Tony Scott, Steve Ellery. He's got a good backup driver to go into that car. And Paul Romano doing well. Dick Johnson, John Bowen not having a happy day and starting to look as though they're losing touch with the situation. But Dick Johnson, don't forget, stops yet to come. Larry Perkins, Russell Ingall. He's got a good backup to come. Gardner with that really bad problem with the tyre flat outside the pace car period. Brad Jones, that we just saw pit, handing over to Wynne Percy. Further down Spurgeon, McConville, Ashby and Reed. We saw them in for an early stop. Kevin Baldock, a brand new Falcon. You'd expect some sort of sorting problem. John Goss discovering that all's not the same as when he left motor racing some years ago, and they're travelling very quickly. Ed Audinsky, Mark Poole, they had to do a gearbox rebuild. Mark Poole had to do it himself on Friday night. Mark Scaife, Jim Richards, not a happy time for them. Then Craig Lowndes, Murphy, well, they're 2 places better than they were at the end of lap 8 and 7. And then Attard and Crick. And then the Ian Palmer car. So things have really reshaped. How do you see it, Howard Marsden? Do you see any hope for people like Larry Perkins, Dick Johnson further down in that part of the field?
Larry concerns me. He's running a bit too slowly. Certainly the Johnson Bow car is getting a move on. The fastest up at the front is in fact Thomas Mazira. He's running harder than the Falcons at the moment, obviously under instructions to, because they're really the only car of the team that are up there, and he's being told to push on. Remembering that the 3 Falcons at the front have yet to make their first serious pit stop.
And Lowndes has done a 13.755.7. Finally, the ever-changing screen has stayed there long enough for me to read it. So it's a new lap record for Craig Lowndes. So as well as leading the race, he did finally set a new lap record, but there was a bit of drama in between times. 111 laps remaining, 50 completed by Alan Jones, by Seaton. Indeed, by Longhurst, Mazira, Steve Johnson, Larkham, Romano, reading through in order Tony Scott, Dick Johnson and Larry Perkins. That's the top 10. It's a pretty good one too, and an interesting one with pit stops due for the leading trio within the next 5 laps. We think. They think.
And we'll all find out. But, quite obviously that 015 car is out there testing. It's testing tyres possibly, the chassis, the strength, but it's also testing the 2 young drivers. Lowndes, and of course Murphy does need his miles before he goes to Bathurst.
And guess Lowndes Lowndes isn't far from overtaking the Winfield team car of Scaife Richards, because they were stationary for a while, and it's only one lap down on Scaife Richards, so 21st to 18th.
Lowndes has got the line now. He should run in ahead of the Falcon quite nicely, and off he goes. The other drivers will know about him. They'll keep out of his way. They know that he's on a different menu sheet to them, and so long as he doesn't come into contact with them, they'll just let him get on with his business. They've got the driver potentially winning the race.
He's overtaken the race leader once, and that's the second time past Glenn Seaton, because Seaton that he's just gone by was not on this occasion the race leader. Now he'll be trying to overtake the race leader again and stay in front of him for longer, but a few fleeting seconds. I should say not overtaking so much as passing, if there's the difference, but certainly a long way off. 52 laps completed by Alan Jones, Glenn Seaton, and by Craig Lowndes, 44, so 8 behind. He was locked up there too for a tad. For a moment he was untidy. But he's in a rush, and he certainly does have an enormous amount of confidence for a 21-year-old who doesn't do a lot of driving of these sorts of cars. But they've got to think about things. He damaged that car on the warm-up lap at Bathurst last year. A lot of people felt that Brad Jones had been badly treated because Lowndes had grabbed the glamour and glory by overtaking John Bowe, the race leader, late in the race when he was forging through. In actual fact, he'd made an error early in the day, and Brad Jones had driven some very hard, quick stints in the car through the middle of the day to get him back into a competitive situation where Craig Lowndes could look good, and it made sense for him to go quickly. It was really a combined effort. But here he is now, out after the race leader, the man in 19th place at this stage, Craig Lowndes, coming round to complete 45 laps. The race leader coming round to complete 53. And Alan Jones, I don't think, will want to argue in any way. He's on his particular agenda, and Craig Lowndes is on a very different one. And it's 1/3 distance of a 161 lap race. Up the back straight, Lowndes will go by, I think.
It's interesting that Jones is being pushed into, in fact, running faster than he has been for the last 10 laps. He's now down to a 1:15.24. So, as usual, Jones doesn't like people coming up and going past.
No, he doesn't. He's not going past now. No, boyo. Well, here we go again. Here we go again, and there are two boys going to have an argument here. One's half the age of the other, less than half the age of the other. One's been world champion, one wants to be. And he's got him.
Discretion and valor.
And valor lies with the young, and discretion lies with the old, generally. And Ben Seaton, watching all that, probably thought, my goodness.
Seaton.
And Seaton coming through. So that Glenn Seaton goes through into the race lead. 30 leads from 35. Alan Jones overtaken by two cars on that half lap. 55 completed at 161. That was about the expected time for the first pit stop. But remember, if they're to do the race in 2 stops, 3 stints, then you need to get a lap or two, if possible, past the 1/3 distance. They've just gone past it now. If we look at Wayne Gardner, or Neil Crompton, in fact, in car 7, he's in 10th place.
And again, just to point out that Thomas Mazera in the Holden dealer team, the competitive Holden dealer team, Commodore, is pushing harder than anybody else. He's down into 1:14.9, and everybody else is circulating in the 1:15 mid to high 1:15. So I think, again, Thomas has been told, get on with it, get into those Falcons. They have to stop. We need a little bit of a cushion when they come back out of the pits with fresh tyres.
The important thing, Nigel Greenway pointing out, is that the cars that pitted earlier, who decided to do so around that lap 30-odd, they've got to get to lap 98 to avoid making 3 stops instead of 2. but no hint at the moment of a pit stop for car 30 or 35, or in third place 25. But then again in fourth place, the stop's been done. Thomas Mazira, who is 11.4 seconds in arrears to the race leader, has pitted.
And is pushing.
So he's doing a 14.75 by comparison with Longhurst on a 15.9, Alan Jones a 16.8, and Seaton a 15.3. So Mazira's nicely placed, really.
Yes, my guess is that these tyres on the front Falcons, in fact, are now getting very tired because they've done all the practice, they've done all of the racing.
Well, they ought to retire them, shouldn't they?
And I think this is why Mazira is looking very strong at the moment and is, as I say, really pushing hard. The Falcons are going to have to make a decision very soon now on tyres, but then they really want to hang on because they're concerned about petrol.
Yep.
Right at the end of the race, so it's
interesting.
A nice little conundrum.
Yes, it is. You need a good computer program to work it out.
And there you go.
And here we go. 3.5 seconds, incidentally, from Mazira forward to Longhurst. But suddenly, second place pits. It might look calm, but it's frantic around those cars.
Obviously not even worried about the brakes. They're not even looking. They're just changing wheels and fuel and getting these people out.
And Longhurst in the pits too, so that second and third are both pitted. Seaton, Mazira will be the order at the moment.
The tyres and fuels beat the drivers on that occasion. That wasn't a very good stop, and it's going to take Parsons a bit of time to settle down now. As we all know, he doesn't have many miles. He does a super job coming up for only 2 races a year, and the pressure goes on to him now. Cold tyres, fresh start for him, lost a bit of time. Quickly he's going to come under instructions to get on with the race.
Good little guy, David Parsons, from down in Tasmania, dairy farmer years ago. He's run the Touring Car Championship as a privateer, but he's a much valued second driver. But if you look at Johnson Bow, for instance, neither of them really are second drivers. And Crompton Gardner are almost equal drivers. Crompton often matches Wayne Gardner's times. So Perkins will share with Russell Ingall, but I see car 17 now in 6th place as being a very strong two-driver combination, not to mention, of course, Thomas Mazira and Peter Brock in 05, which is now 10.9 seconds behind the race leader, Glenn Seaton, in car number 30, and he'll hand over to Alan Grice. And I think in the light both of last weekend, but also in terms of his time in the car, that Alan Grice will be a little bit slower and more gentle. Motoring by the pits is the Peter Jackson car, and that's Glenn Seaton not yet ready to stop. Sorry, it's Parsons in 35.
And Mazira still taking half a second a lap off Seaton.
So this is really interesting, and again to review the race situation, Craig Lowndes, forget the error, but in speed, really quick. The other quick car out there at the moment, the other team car.
Yep.
What's happening, Howard Marsden?
Well, it's really too early to say, because we do have a difference now in the condition of the tyres between the leading Falcons and that leading, or in the front group, Commodore. So it's unfair to talk car for car, but we have to talk tyre for tyre.
Down in the pits, talking with Alan Jones, is John Smales.
And Alan Jones leading the race. How did it feel?
Pretty good, John. Actually, the car was really good. Tyres were fabulous. Brakes were going away just a little bit towards the end there, but really I couldn't ask for anything better. Very consistent.
Those opening laps at sub-record speed, was it too quick?
Well, I don't know. I thought I was always going to be down for that. I mean, now these long endurance races, they call them an endurance race, but really they're a 500-kilometre sprint. We're treating this no different than a championship race.
We hear that Glenn Seaton has a problem with his brakes. How are yours holding up?
Yeah, they were going away a little bit at the back. I had a few moments at the left-hander at the end of the straight. Slid a bit wide. It's wanting to dance around a bit at the back. But just have to brake a little earlier.
Getting ready now for the Glenn Seaton stop. Thanks, Alan.
Okay, John. Thank you.
We saw that earlier from Alan Jones, and a couple of times thought, he's getting sucked into the Craig Lowndes trap, but he's actually got a problem with the setup of the car, where it's tending to grab the rears a little bit much. Car 4, the second of the Coca-Cola team cars. The gap between leader and second place is down to 9.8 seconds. But car 4, Brad Jones, is 17th place.
And still Mazira's the only car at the front that's running in the 14 seconds, 14.8 against Seaton, 15.3, etc. So he's really the fast car in the leading group.
Yeah, and then you go down to 17th and 18th place and you find Scaife and Richards and Lowndes, and they're running in 14, so the only 3 in the race of 21, or 20 now surviving. Lowndes a 14.4, Scaife virtually a 15, and a 14.8 to Mazira, so fastest man on the track continues to be the driver of 015, Craig Lowndes. David Parsons doing a good job, and certainly, and here's a fearless forecast, that the best way to go wrong is to make it, but be very unlikely to see David Parsons do anything indiscreet or anything other than the job again that Howard Marsden, you say he's been bought to do, he's been paid to do, and that is look after it and bring it home. Larry Perkins, been in the car a long time now, along with Glenn Seaton, but unlike Glenn Seaton, Larry's been in, Glenn hasn't. Perkins at the moment is 6th. But he's completed only coming round to complete his 60th. Seaton and Mazira did it a long time ago. So that it is 9.3 seconds as Mazira keeps racing and pulling himself forward on Seaton. And of course doesn't have a pit stop imminent. Seaton does. Stephen Johnson's 24 seconds off the leader. We have to wait then for David Parsons in 35, who's in 4th place. Dick Johnson in 17's in 5th. Larry Perkins in 11 is in 6th place. Paul Romano, Tony Longhurst, Neil Crompton, and Tony Scott, Steve Ellery. Brad Jones 17th, Scaife Richards 18th, and Lowndes 19th. The race leaders in. Now Thomas Mazira will come by. Holden Racing Team will again, but for a longer time, lead the race as he goes by, and Glenn Seaton changes over with Alan Grice. So laps 1 to 19 led by this car, 54 to 60 led by it. Alan Jones led laps 20 to 53, and Mazira from lap 61 goes off into the lead, having done a 1 minute 15 dead, and over Stephen Johnson has a lead of 15 seconds now. Seaton, wait for him to come up to the start finishing line, wait for him to trigger the system, and Seaton is in 3rd. His other team car, Alan Jones, David Parsons, is in 4th. Dick Johnson, John Bowe, 5th. Larry Perkins still 6th. So, Holden Racing Team certainly got good command of the race at the moment. Thomas Mazira, Peter Brock handing over to him early, and I suppose you'd expect immediately after the first pit stop for the guys that didn't, who went their full stint, I suppose you'd expect the early pit stoppers to be the guys who are looking better at that stage, and that's the 05 car Mazira, the 18 car Stephen Johnson taking over from Charlie O'Brien. And down in the pits, let's hear from the man who led the race for 2 stints, 19 of the opening laps, and then 6 more later, Glenn Seaton.
And Glenn Seaton says he's absolutely exhausted. Really tough work, Glenn.
Yeah, it is really, to keep up that sort of pace all the way. It wears you out a fair bit. I had a bit of knock off on the brakes going down the back there, and I had to keep pumping the pedal everywhere to get a pedal back, but no, the car's fine. It'll go through the race like that, no problem.
Your team was talking about bringing you in almost 30 laps ago because of that knock off on the brakes.
Yeah, once the pace car came out and the brakes cooled off, they were good, so they came back. So we decided to just persevere and go on.
Well, you proved to everyone that you could get to lap 60 without a fuel stop. How much fuel did you have left at the end?
Not a lot. Last year we did the 63 laps, so we're pretty happy with the fuel economy.
I've got to ask you the same question I asked Jonesy. Those early laps, that incredible pace, was it too fast?
No, not at all, really. I quite enjoyed it. It was quite a good race with Craig there for a while, trying to get down the outside of me, and down the end, he really just made a blunder getting down there on the marbles, and you just can't stop when you get on the marbles.
You gave yourself a little bit of racing room there.
Yeah, for sure. It's a long race, and I looked at it as a long day, so I didn't want to be involved in any incidents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir Alan Gross, the man who tripped up doing some laps in the last few minutes of the final test session for the Eastern Creek 12 Hour just a week ago. Speared off around Corporate Hill, hit the tail, pulled the front in, injured himself. He was banged in the head and a bit uncomfortable, and the car very, very badly damaged. At the wheel now of car number 30 in third place. Team car running immediately behind it in fourth place.
What's very interesting here is that Parsons, who for the first 4 laps was off the pace a bit, has settled down as a long-distance race driver should, and he's now very competitive with everybody doing times 1:15, middle 1:15s, and very competitive with everybody else except Thomas Messera, who's still running fastest in the stage.
Dick Johnson's the man to watch. He's just behind this pair. Have a look at him. You'll see him lurk. There he is. That's 5th place, and in the foreground was 3rd and 4th. So have a look at this as a race and a dice. And Dick Johnson knows it and wants it. And when they... And not so very far back is Larry Perkins in 11. There he is. Larry's down there too. So this is 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th, all in gun sight here. This is what we said, that in the 17 car, perhaps we have a stronger driver pairing. Interesting too with Larry Perkins, because handing over to Russell Ingall, good hard runner, a professional motor racer, which few of these drivers are. Most of them are part-timers with other jobs, but he runs in England. And there you see Larry.
Now, we were talking earlier about Larry not really being on the pace, but suddenly he's decided to pull about half a second back out of his time and push on a bit.
Sandwiched in with him, 63 laps completed, 3 laps down on the leader, is car number 4, the second Coke car. That's the Brad Jones car that he's sharing with Win Percy. So, look at this, Johnson drawing them in. Larry Perkins wanting to go through, but no space. The implacable look of L. Perkins from Cowangi. Superb guy. One of my great sights in motor racing was heading down the Brands Hatch in 1976 in England for the Race of Champions. They used to have extra Formula One races in those days. And apart from the fact that Alan Jones went fantastically well there, I think he was a 2nd or a 3rd, really threatening for the race lead, and it was his first sort of jump into prominence in a Grand Prix Formula One car. Larry Perkins was at the wheel of a BRM, and a rotten old dud thing it was too, but he was sideways everywhere. He was hanging the rear out in the BRM at Brands Hatch, and as I saw a Ferrari transporter for the first time, I saw these cars, and John Watson was there, and I heard about James Hunt and Richard Burton had gone off with James Hunt's wife, and Larry Perkins was driving the BRM, and I thought, boy, this is top-level motor racing. It was all happening. And it's happening here at Sandown too. Larry still can't find his way past Win Percy. The Englishman's a hard man. He's been upside down at Le Mans, grinding away the roof of his car and his helmet at ferociously high speed. He's also launched his car off into the kitty litter here some years ago, Win Percy, down at the end of the straight when he was having a big argument. He was down in the Craig Lowndes sand. But he's a hard man, as he's showing Larry Perkins right now. 3 laps down and giving away nothing. Race situation. Mazera, 18 seconds in front of Stephen Johnson. Then this battle. Seaton, Jones, David Parsons, Dick Johnson, Larry Perkins. Top 6.
two quickest cars in the top six. Mazira continues to be fastest on most laps, running now about 1:15.3, but Dickie Johnson's also down into that time. The rest of them are running about 0.3 to 0.5 of a second slower than those two cars.
And doing low 14s at 14.2 is Craig Lowndes. Also in the 14s is Mark Scaife, Jim Richards. Larry got him now, surely. Boy, that's treacherous over there. Howard Marsden shook his head and said, no way, there's no way to go down there. You see the marbles. Glenn Seaton talked of the marbles that Craig Lowndes got into. Look at it at the edge of the track. Just balls up and rolls like ball bearings under the tyres. You get on them and Craig Lowndes will tell you you're gone. On a clean track, there's other lines available. On a dirty track, 67 laps completed by 20-odd cars, there's a lot of rubber shred. It's all lying as a trap around the edge and the outside of corners. So the Mitre 10 car there, looking similar colour to the Peter Jackson cars, but 30 going through, still holding the better of the two places for those two cars. Third to David Parsons, fourth. Johnson fifth, Perkins still sixth. And Perkins still busy behind the red car. Look at it, Coca-Cola heads him still. And Mazira was Lowndes had been in the pits, 015. So, action down there. And it is 05. Thomas Mazira, who relegates the lead, hands it over to Stephen Johnson, so another race leader. And 05. Now, this is curious to me. Why?
And it's not quick either.
33 and 68, so 35 laps only. 35 laps only difference between the two. No question a problem around the right rear of the car. Fuel leaking. And I think down in the pits watching probably with some interest and with his own tales to tell, Wayne Gardner. Is that so, Wayne?
Yeah, hi Will. Yeah, we've unfortunately run into a bit of a problem when the pace car was out there somewhere or other, picked up a puncture, and unfortunately went down when I was going past the exit or the entry into the pit lane. So I had to wobble around at a very slow pace to try and get around and change the front. So
Wayne, we saw it all, but we're watching 05 at the moment, and suddenly the race leader has come to naught. Brock, who pitted on 33 and handed over to Thomas Mazira, who led the race very convincingly over laps 61 to 67, handed it over at 68 reluctantly. But this is the first time that Stephen Johnson has led a touring car race, but no doubt John Smalesbury and Campbell will be quickly on to finding out what's gone wrong with 05. Along with Seaton, with Alan Jones and Stephen Johnson, one of four leaders of this Sandown 500.
Yeah, well, there's been quite a number of problems that Wayne's been telling us about out on the circuit itself. As you see the fuel there from the 05 car. Wayne, you were saying, for example, that the Larry Perkins car seems to be right off the pace.
yeah, Larry was struggling in front of me. In fact, I had a little bit of speed on him, but my thing was running a bit hot, so I was trying to hold back and get some clear air and cool air to cool my thing down. But Larry looked like he was understeering in and oversteering out, and looked like he was struggling a lot more on tyres.
Well, when he came in on that unscheduled stop, it appeared that he had a problem with the rear of the car. The rear tyre was really in strife.
Yeah, well, as I said, he is sideways a lot off the corners, and obviously that hurts the tyres. And I was actually quite astounded because normally he's got a very good handling car, and our things was superior to his, and that's why I thought I was going to have him. And unfortunately, I picked up a flat, so that's put us, I think, a half a lap or lap behind the leaders now, which is a disappointment.
Well, down here in the pits, I'm absolutely amazed at the pace that this race is going at,
Yeah.
both out on the track and in the pits. You've got pit stops happening in the 20 seconds. driver changes happening in the 15s. It's just suddenly taken a quantum leap up, hasn't it, Wayne?
That's right. You know, the touring car series is absolutely booming. It's rating, and people are coming in their flocks, and it's made everyone pick the pace up. Everyone's driving harder. They've got stronger combinations in drivers. The cars are making more horsepower now. This is actually a 500-kilometre-hour sprint race. It's no longer an endurance race. It's a sprint race, and everyone works hard in the pits. We've got big crews. The whole thing is absolutely go all the time, so it's very, very hot.
And in the pits as well with us is Ian Campbell, and he has Thomas Mazzera.
Very hot, frustrated Thomas Mazzera, I may say, John. Thomas, an unexpected trip to the pits. What's the problem?
Well, it's sort of a bit unfortunate, you know. We were in a good position, we were leading, and I was pacing myself to Glenn. And I just, on a back straight, I just left one of the Coke cars, and the exhaust just blew up. I think the flange, sort of where it goes into mufflers, it just blew up open, and, you know, not much you can do. We tried to fix that, but we're losing lots of laps.
Thomas Mazzera, the 05 car behind the wall. They're going to have a shot at getting it back, but not looking good at the moment.
Well, from race lead for them, it's become, as we come to the race leader, Stephen Johnson. First time he's led a major touring car race. From race lead for Holden, there is now only one Holden in the top 6. And that's Larry Perkins in 5th place.
He's down a lap, or nearly a lap, on the race leader.
Let's have a look at the placings then. From the automatic scoring system. All linked in, and we'll give you the placings and the gaps as well. And there it is. So that Stephen Johnson currently driving car 18 from Alan Grice, currently in 30. Dick Johnson's in 17 at the moment, and David Parsons in 35. Larry Perkins still at the wheel of 11, though, hanging on grimly before he hands his treasured car over to Russell Ingall, the Formula Ford and other single-seat drivers, the Australian who does most of his racing in England. And then Tony Longhurst handed over to Wayne Park in his Castrol Falcon. There's Wayne Gardner's car, Neil Crompton doing the work as Wayne's talking with us. In car 7, Tony Scott, Stephen Ellery, Paul Romano, Dunstan, Trevor Ashby and Steve Reed, David Parsons, John Goss, a different David Parsons, and then Kevin Waldock and Mark McLaughlin, who's built the engines for Kevin Waldock. Then we run down through the field, and you see Mark Poole and Ed Wodinski, Mark Scaife, Jim Richards, and Lowndes down there in 19th place, but still turning very hot laps indeed, and well out of the race at this stage is Ian Palmer and Brett Peters in the 21st place for car number 20.
A young Stephen Johnson, in fact, has got 26 seconds over the Seaton car, and then there are 1, 2, 3, 4 cars within 13 seconds one of the other. So a very good break by the Grice and Steve Johnson car.
Yes, and in fact Alan Grice in that car at this stage. So
I made a mistake there, I'm sorry, it's not Grice in that car, apologies.
Yeah, Stephen Johnson, Charlie O'Brien. But that's the situation at Sandown. A nice lead to car number 18, and 4 different race leaders took it over on lap 68. They've completed 73. We'll bring you back to Sandown very shortly.
Hello again.
Have a look at this, Mark Scaife. Very busy indeed, and Larry Perkins equally busy keeping out of his way. And let's have a look at it from another point of view. Down the end of the straight, Craig Lowndes' corner. So it can happen to very good guys indeed. He just got it far enough around to stay on the grass. Gee, hung it early, didn't he? And he lost enough speed before he hit the grass. Oh, the Suzuki guys were told about rejoining dangerously.
It does look as though it is Scaife and not Richards.
Jim Richards did a big stint last weekend. Mark Scaife was driving in, interestingly, one of the RX-7 Mazdas. Jim Richards was driving the Porsche with Peter Fitzgerald, and Jim did an outstanding job. Scaife didn't have the chance to do it. It was the car that had been damaged by Alan Grice, and so it didn't run so well. It came home finally fourth, just with a brake problem late in the race, and was picked for third by Andrew Miedeke. But Richards was outstanding, siding his way through the field, as did also the race winner, John Bowe. And Richards set a new lap record, the fastest lap of the race, and he did it in about lap 350. It was just stunning form, and he's been in stunning form in the Ford Mondeo too.
Whilst also you're away, the Gardner car came in with yet another puncture on the right front wheel. Now, we mentioned yesterday when they were having the shootout that in fact that car runs a huge amount of negative canter at the front. That is the canting of the car, of the wheels up into the bodywork. There's a possibility that in fact they're rubbing the inside of the tyre and literally wearing the tyres out and blowing them as a result of too much negative canter on the front of the car.
Yes, because as you say, you mentioned that yesterday in their qualifying, and car 015, Lowndes.
One of the enthusiastic youngsters.
Yes, 14.6 was his last lap. Nobody else in the 14s. But another moment of exploring the outer surrounds of Sandown.
At the front of the race, Steve Johnson still away from everybody else by 26 seconds to the Grice car, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 of them still at around about 13 seconds.
But look how close Grice in car number 30 in second place, Dick Johnson, John Bowe in 17, and David Parsons in 35, how close they are together. This is third place, Dick Johnson. Car behind him, David Parsons in 35. He's coming up onto Grice in 30. So there is only a small number of seconds, 2.2 between second, third and fourth place. Watch it, this is the meat in the sandwich, this is the filling between the other two cars.
Johnson's come up behind these two cars. He's managed to get through onto Parsons, and now an interesting fight of Johnson and Grice. How many years racing between those two?
Oh. Yes, plenty. And down in the distance, the Winfield car with lights on. Mark Scaife saying, I want to make up for some errors. I'm getting fed up with being down the tail end of the top 20. I think I'll get a rush on and get serious. Not that he wasn't before, of course, but trying to pick some up. There he is, looming into the background there, along with Craig Lowndes. He's in second place. Leading them all is Stephen Johnson in car number 18. This is Dick Johnson. This is in 17, in third place, being led by his son. 2 places further forward. Dick would like to make it 1. He wants Alan Grice in car 30. He's in a big rush, and I'm sure John Bowe will be too when he gets back into the car in 17. Really interesting. I'd like to know more about the Holden Racing Team problem with car 05, because they've had a wretched day in cars that have been very quick. Dick Johnson storming up the back straight, off towards 262 kilometres an hour, at close to 7,500 revs. I happened to see the revs and the speed sitting on their computer, and then a guy saw that I'd seen it the other day and said, I'd rather you didn't write that down, you know.
You can talk about it, but don't write it.
No, I wouldn't tell anybody, truly I wouldn't. Well, it tells people, of course, other teams what gear ratios they're using. If you know exactly what revs they're doing and what top speed they have, might give you an insight as to what final drive ratio you want.
And how much power they've got, actually, because power is the thing, obviously, that gives you that final top speed.
The top speed. So, yes, they didn't want it broadcast. Well, they didn't want it, let's say, told to everybody else before that, but now it doesn't matter because they won't be back here for a year. Johnson doesn't quite make it. But this is the battle for second, for third and for fourth. And it's a beauty. And by comparison with Holden Racing Team that's had one major driver error and a couple of misdemeanours and a mechanical problem in their two cars, the two Peter Jackson cars, running second and fourth at the moment. Being led and sandwiched between the two Shell FAI team cars. Stephen Johnson in 18 leads, his father Dick in third place. And Falcons 1 to 5 with Longhurst's co-driver Wayne Park in 25.
Got him.
Now
No.
fifth and very nearly losing, surely, Bryce in car 30. He got round very sideways. The best Commodore is 6th, Larry Perkins 11.
And the two not-so-young drivers are determined, one against the other, that they're going to have to work to beat the other. It's good fun.
And an assault coming from behind on Dick Johnson. Look out, boy. Keep your mirrors in sight too. And this time on the inside, got to have it covered. Look back and there they are, slotting in. 3-4 behind him, so it's Johnson team 1-2 in the motor race. And Parsons wants Alan Grice. Very bad behaviour here. Dreadful backstreet arguments.
So Johnson's managed to get through on the two Peter Jackson cars. I think he'll tend to go away from them and set his own pace and get in and try and chase his son down, because he's 27 seconds off his son.
And there's probably no better incentive for the 5 times Australian Touring Car Champion Dick Johnson than to have his son 27 seconds in front. You see him take that big breath of air as he slotted it into a gear, and he looked more serious than I've seen him look for a little while. He was happy to watch John Bowe win the Touring Car Championship, but I think he wants to do his own work here today.
That big breath was literally slowing the heart down. The big pump, getting past Ricey, the two of them having a good lock-up battle, very close to taking both the cars off together. Now I've done it, let's settle down, let's get on with the job. Interesting thing, will there be team orders if it would continue like this between father and son, and how many fingers would the boy raise if asked?
Or lose if he doesn't behave. Down in the pits is a man who's won the race 9 times, who didn't lead it today, but his car did. It's Peter Brock.
And I regret to say there won't be a 10th win this year for Peter Brock. Peter, what's gone wrong with 05?
Look, it's an incredible thing. I've had some strange things happen over the years, but this is a beauty. The exhaust pipe is cracked and actually fractured through. And you can't use welding apparatus in the pits, so we're sort of stuck. Really, it isn't a big job to fix it, but if we push the car behind here, we're out, and we can't use the equipment in the pits, so we're having to retire 05 today.
Now, we saw fuel and oil coming from the car when it was pushed away. There's still a trail of it behind us.
Well,
what's that?
I don't think it'd be any oil there, but it'd certainly be fuel, because the guys automatically refuel the car, and with the it's got a bleed-off system, which means if it's overfull, it bleeds off a fraction and drips down underneath the car. But no, the car was running beautifully all the way through. But this is a very nice one to find out for Bathurst, isn't it?
Well, I guess so, but what about the 10th victory, Peter?
Well, I thought we were looking pretty good there. I was sitting behind Glenn and Alan Jones, and I thought to myself, well, this is comfortable. It's very, very easy to do. Not hurting the motor car. We did a pit stop using the pace car strategy, which worked out to be a very good move. That's why Steve Johnson's in front at the moment of the other guys, because he took advantage of the same situation. We were 44 seconds up at the time ahead of the other guys after a pit stop each. I thought, Jets, a free pit stop. So the strategy was there. The team's, I think the whole preparation was there. We feel good about it, but that's motor racing. Things go wrong.
Will Hagan yesterday was delighted that you spent quite a deal of time with the Suzuki Challenge drivers to just settle them down a bit and tell them how to go motor racing. Is there a chance that the HRT will do the same thing with you with Lowndes?
I suggest so, yes. I think that will happen early on there. Obviously, Craig forgot it was a long race, and he probably thought he was out there qualifying. And it was just a pity that, you know, for a moment's sort of indiscretion, you throw away a chance in a long race like this. Obviously, be kicking himself, but you learn by experience in life, don't you?
What's your advice to him going to be?
I'd say settle down and let the race fall into a natural rhythm. And don't be too concerned about racing other cars. Get yourself settled, get yourself balanced, and then go about motor racing as everything is settled. But when the adrenaline's rushing through the body in those early laps, that's when it's easy to make mistakes.
Peter Brock, thanks very much. We look forward to seeing you, Matt.
Thank you.
Dickie's actually being hounded by two what we might call ghost cars. They're not really in the race. They've lost too many laps. They're out there testing and pushing harder. So that's the skate car has just gone through. And behind them is the young Lowndes and Murphy car. So Dickie will let them go through, not have any tangling with them, and get on with his job of keeping up with his son,
who has completed 86 laps, is out on his 87th in a 161 lap race, so it's just over half race distance, and has to get another 12 laps to 98 to avoid making an extra stop. In other words, to have only one more stop. So anxious times as you get towards the pit stop. It's a bit like arriving in a country town and wondering if you're going to make the service station. As we see now, the pit stop for 015. Lowndes just going out in his times there a little while ago. And interesting to hear Peter Brock say, handing over to another hard young charger too, but interesting to hear Brock say, get into a rhythm and don't race other people. Do your own times. Greg Murphy is a very talented single-seater driver and also drives Super 2-litre Tourers. He drives from one of the Audi Quattro team of Brad Jones, and does a very good job, albeit that he badly damaged a car at Winton about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So two young talents, two very hungry young men, keen to go places in motor racing in car 015. And equally, I wonder if this is another team management trap, whether Greg Murphy wants to not to be outshone by Craig Lowndes. That's a danger too, Howard Marsden, for a team manager.
Yes, it is, but if they're going to put two young chargers together, it's something they have to accept. That's the reason for doing it, I guess, that they've got a car that will run very hard, provided they can keep it together. And look at the heads over, the hands rocking backwards and forwards. They have been told to get into this car. And yeah, they potentially are racing themselves, one another, and everybody else that's in the way, because they want the knowledge for Bathurst. Remember what Peter said, interesting to have found an exhaust cracking problem here at Sandown. What else can they find by running this car super hard today? So they're really feeling confident at Bathurst.
Still, the best placed Commodore is Perkins in 6th place. Do you really draw anything from this? But we don't answer that question, Howard Marsden. Let's hear from this audacious young talent that took pole position yesterday. Down with John Smales.
Probably the most controversial man in the pits today, but so relaxed in himself. Craig, how do you feel after everything that's happened to you in the last hour and a half?
I feel pretty good actually right now. It's just me being a little bit ambitious, trying to get past Glenn the first couple of laps. I knew better, but no, I just got a little bit frustrated, I think, just following it for them couple of laps, and I just made that mistake, and I just thought that was all it. But now we're on the road again and we're circulating, so it's good.
Well, after the mistake, you come back drive, establishing a new outright lap record of the circuit. I mean, we didn't expect that from you.
Oh, well, the car was good. No, we got back on the circuit. Obviously, the rocks and all the dust in the car, it didn't help, but no, I circulated and the car feels good. It obviously hasn't done any damage, so I've come in and put another set of tyres since the accident, and no, the car feels good.
Craig, as a young man, you make a big mistake trying to take the lead. You stuff the team's chances. You'd expect that your heart would just fall away, wouldn't it? And yet you seem so confident in yourself.
Oh, it did. I just sat in the car. I just couldn't believe what I'd done. It's just a driver error. But yeah, now the car's circulating, I'm happy again.
Well, you just got a round of applause from your team. You were surrounded by happy, smiling faces. You've got support.
Oh yeah, sure. And the biggest sort of thing I felt was for Greg. I just thought I'd let him down, but no, Greg's out in the circuit now and he's circulating. So, yeah.
But didn't you expect to be punished when you came back?
I didn't want to, but no, the guys are a little bit probably upset, but they're not going to show it.
So, for yourself now, what does it do to your confidence?
Well, I got back on. It's like falling off a horse. You get back on it, and I got back out and circulated. And as you said, I've set the quickest lap, so I'm happy and the confidence building all the time since I was out there. Obviously, that corner was a little bit of was the corner that I took a little bit more cautious. I actually went off during that last stint, just a brief moment there, but no, it's good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
There's a young man who sees the positives in life. He doesn't get pulled back too much by the negatives. It'd take a big heavy set of brakes, I think, to haul him in. Howard Marsden, what are you thinking?
I think he handled those direct questions really very well. And again, another side of motorsport that's very important, that these people not only have the talent to drive a car, but in fact present themselves very well on behalf of their sponsors and supporters.
In 18th place at the moment, car 015, and Greg Murphy, the driver, New Zealander, who, if he drives well enough and often enough in Australia, will definitely claim him as an Australian. And he'd done a 15.6, he's done a 15 dead. I think we'll see some 14s from him in just a moment. So those HRT cars are really quick.
Yes, they are. And interesting, when we came back from the last commercial advertisement, Steve Johnson was 26 seconds ahead of Dickie Johnson. And what are we now, some 10 to 15 laps later, 26 seconds between the two of them. So the youngster's doing a very good job. A
very good job. He really is, because there's, gee, not thousands of kilometres, thousands of laps experience in the hand at the wheel of car 17, but we're looking at Greg Murphy at the moment in 015. And at his end of the field, car 20, incidentally, Brett Peters is driving at the moment. The Ian Palmer car is going again. So we have the full field of, no, I was going to say the full field of 21. P. Brock's car and Thomas Mazira parked in the pits. 20 cars remaining, though, and Greg Crick is further down in the car that he's sharing, so he's in 20th place. So it's Mark McLaughlin in 11th place at this stage, and we come from the race leader, Stephen Johnson. 16.6 his last lap, a second quicker to Father Dick. And yes, he's coming up to a 21st birthday soon, so there'll be a fairly bright party up in Queensland, I'd think. I'd imagine it might be on the Gold Coast. Father Dick has a jet-powered boat that does something like 35, 37 knots, but it's about 50-odd feet long. Dick drives it and covers ground about as quickly as he tries to on the racetrack, and 7 laps remaining. 7 laps the target for this car to get to ensure that it hasn't incurred an extra pit stop, that it gets through the race on 2. So 98 laps the target, they're on lap 92. Stephen Johnson doing a great job sharing the car with Charlie O'Brien. Charlie would love to be back in the winner's circle too, Howard Marsden, wouldn't he?
Been a period of time for old Charlie.
Because he's been around a long time, and you can get forgotten, and it's this sort of performance that comes back, restores your own faith, but then puts you up in the forefront of considerations, and the phone starts to ring perhaps in June instead of in September, offering a drive for Bathurst or for Sandown. So Charlie O'Brien, an L34 Tirana in 1976. So that's 18 years. Second in this race in the Sierra with Peter Brock in 90. Stephen Johnson, a much shorter pedigree than that. But we saw him in that Thundersports race earlier today, and you were impressed, Howard, there with his form. Well, I was too, because he was using his head. He seemed, it's easy to go fast, isn't it? Well, if you've got the talent, it's easy to go fast, but then thinking about it and doing it right is another ingredient that not all quick drivers have.
Again, another person who's very impressive today, in fact, is David Parsons. We keep talking about the fact that he does so little racing. He's still running in closely behind Dickie. David Parsons, again, he's been here 82, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the time, usually in the Holden Commodores. Had a very good run with the BMW M3 with Neil Crompton. So the man's been around, but they just bring him out, dust him off, put him in a car, and look at the situation where he's now driving cars as quickly. If in fact the last lap round he was the fastest man on the circuit.
Quicker than Dick Johnson, which is why he's hounding him now. There's the Hungry Jack's car back onto the track. The Ian Palmer car that was stuck earlier. Have a look at David Parsons. This is really tremendous stuff. What a talent. What a good lad. Gee, well, you know, you don't forget how to ride a bicycle, but you might expect you wouldn't be quite as quick after quite so long out of it. 24.7 the gap between first and second. Two Shell Team cars, 18 from 17. Stephen Johnson from father Richard. Further back, Richard, very busy indeed. He said all right for John Bowe to be the front runner now, but I don't think he expects people like David Parsons to come along and rattle his chain.
2 or 3 times we've seen, in fact, the Peter Jackson cars and the Shell cars running together up the back straight, and every single time the Shell cars have got more power. They get away every single time up the back straight, so they've definitely got a power advantage in the Shell car over the Peter Jackson car.
I don't think Dick had enjoyed this much pressure, actually. I don't think he'd like it. I don't think he'd like it from David Parsons. Maybe wrong. Coming round now, they complete 94 as Stephen Johnson did some 24 seconds earlier. Second and third place we're watching. Grice is in fourth in car 30. Wayne Park fifth in the Longhurst car, number 25. Larry Perkins. His Commodore is the best of the Commodores. It's still sixth place. Ellery in car 6 is in 7th place, another Commodore. Romano 8th. Crompton in the Wayne Gardner car is 9th, and Mark McLaughlin in car number 28 that he's sharing with Kevin Waldox in 10th. And he built the engines for them as well. And the gap between first and second is reducing. It's taking a long time. And remember, 94 laps completed, 98 laps their target.
And don't forget that we've spoken that within a few laps now, Steve Johnson will be in a position to go through without any stop. This means that his tyres are getting towards the end of their most useful life. So there may be a reason why, in fact, he's starting to fall a little bit further back.
And Stephen Johnson appears as though he may not have made it. This is Dick, though. Dick in 17, so he hands over, gets out of the grips of David Parsons, and he makes the Peter Jackson team 2-3 on the road. John Bowe gets into the car. Have a look at this. This is the new Australian touring car champion. He won the 12-hour last weekend. He had the second fastest lap in the race there in the Mazda RX-7. And here is a man absolutely at the heights of his driving performance. Look at that. Just grabbed a gear, looked up, checks everything, and goes out now. And for all that Dick Johnson was driving quickly, I think you'll see from John Bowe some very determined laps. They had 60 laps. They've had 60 laps done in their last stint. They have 66 laps remaining. So they may have another stop coming yet. So we wait for them to come round, and they've slipped to 5th as 6 is that's Ellery. Stephen Ellery's gone round in 7th place in the Pinnacle Motorsport car that he's sharing with Tony Scott. And that'll be a pace car, I think. Oh, it'll be definitely a pace car. No question.
Now there's the luck of the draw. Johnson's just come in for a stop, and potentially there's a pace car to come out within 1 or 2 laps of that. Luck of the draw.
And Stephen Johnson wants to get to 98 laps. Oh, but he's going again. And so, no pace car. Stephen Johnson wants to get to 98 laps, and he's on lap 97 now. So, good luck for us. Tony Scott, Stephen Ellery there. That's the face of the 21-year-old, tall and lanky, who does a very good job in the Super 2 litre series. And car 38. Mark Poole, Ed Ordinsky, haven't seen them before. Mark Poole, a good driver out of South Australia in Formula V and other single-seaters. And Ed Wodensky, top rally driver, who again, the race leader is in, and he might perhaps have made quite the distance he needed to make. Stephen Johnson comes in. Charlie O'Brien takes over. And the race leader was car number 18, will be David Parsons in 35. The car that led the race previously in the hands of Alan Jones from lap 20 to 53 and takes over the lead again on lap 97. 161 laps this Sandown 500, so 64 remain. Larry Perkins trying to go around the outside there, and a bit of damage to car number 18. I'm not sure that wasn't inflicted then by Larry Perkins. So side light going missing, so the Ford parts bin will have to find another bit. They've probably got stacks of them sitting in the transporter. They must carry an enormous number of spares, Howard Marsden.
Yes, they do. It's just come off as that side repeater lamp, but they do get very good support from Ford Motor Company, so if they do have a problem, the local Ford dealers, in fact, will rob cars if necessary to look after the race cars.
So we have Fords currently lying in the top 5 places, and with 97 laps completed, a Ford has led all but 6 laps so far. Are you feeling guilty, Howard Marsden, as a former Ford team manager? You're smiling, so I don't suppose so. Down in the pits, let's go to John Smale. Ian Campbell.
Dick Johnson, a little hot. It's a warm day in Melbourne for you today, and the car's running 1-2 at the moment. Pit stops both about the 25-second mark. You should be happy at this stage.
Well, at this stage, I'm very happy indeed. You know, we've just got another 40 or 50 or 60 laps or whatever it is to go, and if we can be in that position at the end, I'll be very, very happy, I can assure you.
What about the pressure out there? How are you handling it? It's really on.
The thing that I can't handle is him beating me. That's the problem. I can handle the pressure. Like, I'm as cool as a cucumber. Have a look at him. He's worn out. Be real.
Oh, is that a true story, Steve? Worn out? The father's saying that at the moment.
No, I was going past them at the end of the stint, so... No, it's... I feel really good. I had a lot of cramps in my legs at Oran Park, and I've worked on my fitness between Oran Park and now, and I feel really good. I got to the car, my leg's not sore. I feel really good.
Well, it's certainly Father's Day, and his Father's Day, and as much as the son's winning at the moment. Team strategies, what about driver changes from now on?
We're going to run through to the finish now. We've got enough fuel, we've got enough everything just to run our car right till the very end.
Steve, and the other thing is, you make me absolutely sick. You look as fit as.
Oh, well, like I said, I've been working on it, and I feel really good. It's really paid off, and I'm looking forward to Bathurst now.
The Shell team looking good at the moment, running 1-2.
Well, they were, but in fact they're running 4-5 now, as David Parsons in 35 leads from Bryce in 30. Charlie O'Brien up into 3rd place as he comes flashing by now, just to put the next lap on the board. And car 25, Longhurst's Falcon, is in 4th place. Dick Johnson's 5th place. Larry Perkins, still the best of the Commodores, car number 11, is in 6th place. The interesting thing about all the discussions about the downforce and the Ford people who've had to give away something, allegedly, for Sandown, which probably won't show up as much at Sandown as it will at at Bathurst, with many more corners of high speed, is, our cars are pushing and they're hopeless. But Neil Crompton said to me, he said, our cars, if you measure them on the PI system, you look at the readouts, the absolute middle of the corner, the Commodores are slower.
And it's a combination. People keep talking about aerodynamics, but of course there's the suspension, there's the track, which is the length of the car, there's the size of the bonnet for the amount of downforce that's available for these vehicles. Basically, through the fast corners, the Falcon has always been a faster car than the Commodore. However, do remember that Mazira, for a number of laps, was the fastest car out there, running against all of the Falcons. So despite the results as they're coming up at the moment, speed differential is not that big.
And Mazira, of course, is the only Commodore that's led, and he led only for 6 laps till he ran into that problem. I mean, it's hard to read out Commodore competitiveness out of a car that blew the guts out of its exhaust pipe. In the last 2 laps, John Bowe And this guy's not racing like Craig Lowndes and Greg Murphy down at the tail end of the field just having a thrash and seeing whether the car breaks and how much time they can pick up. Bow has done a 14.5, a 14.27 and a 14.85. He's scything through the traffic. He's getting every last bit out of the car and going like a rocket ship, and at the moment in fourth place with his teammate Charlie O'Brien in third. So it's the Glenn Seaton team, Peter Jackson in 1-2, and it's the Dick Johnson team, Shell FAI in 3-4.
And Bow, of course, is catching the car ahead of him.
And then Castrol, Commodore, Falcon Commodore in 5-6.
Yeah, interesting that. But anyway, yeah, we've got Bow, in fact, is catching the car ahead of him. So maybe Dickie's told him to make sure which car comes home first.
Exactly. Wayne Gardner, the Coca-Cola car. Car 7 is back in 7th as it was ages ago. He's done 100 laps to end up exactly where he was at the start. You should be able to do the laps more cheaply than that. You shouldn't have to spend that much money to stay in the same position, surely. 14.4 for Bow. Charlie O'Brien at 18.5. 4-1 the difference now. O'Brien's no mean steerer.
He must have been held up or something.
One would think. The only other 18-second lap was McConville in car 39 in 14th place. Oh, and one coming in there for the other Parsons in car number 55. That being the truck racing David Parsons, who with Mike Court is in car 55, 56. Bow. There it is. Don't give me any bother, boy. That's how quickly it is to get through the engine rev range. You probably drop back to about 4.8, 4.6 on the change and rev it to 7.5 and up you go again. 7.5 is the maximum revs they're allowed to do. They're governed to that. And not far away from each other. 18 from 17.
And what's interesting is that the time differential between the Shell team who have pitted and the Peter Jackson team who have not pitted is around the 30-second mark. So the pit stop pressure that's going to go on to the two Peter Jackson cars when they come in for their change is going to be very high indeed.
So the last lap was 2.5 seconds to the advantage of John Bell. Goes past Charlie O'Brien. Now, O'Brien wouldn't even want to argue. He hit a curve there, and John Bell's just supremely confident in the car, and Charlie O'Brien's slipping into it. And
in fact, this will be very good for Charlie to follow John through and just see what he's doing and how he's handling the car.
Over towards the pit lane complex, you can see it there in the distance, the low, flat building. Looming up onto the tail now of, is that the Winfield car? Coca-Cola car, sorry. That car in 7th place. Wayne Gardner, lucky he got out of the commentary box to take over when it got its second flat tyre. And Neil Crompton brought it in. Both drivers been out in it when it's had a flat on the right front. The Ian Palmer white car, Hungry Jackson, down the back there. Over a second a lap, more than a second a lap, being gained by John Bow on the two Peter Jackson cars. Bow of 14.8, Grice of 15.8, and Parsons of 15.6. Now there's an interesting thing, and we'll watch it. Parsons compared with Grice. Grice, the driver of the greater reputation, but Parsons at the moment, at least on one lap compared, the quicker driver, the part-time Tasmanian. But down in the pits, it's John Smales again.
And in the pits, Brad Jones's car is being pushed away. When Percy brought the vehicle in, there was white smoke everywhere, billowing from the car, out on the circuit. Then it came in, Brad Jones got in the car, then got out again. What happened, Brad?
Well, it was a pretty short stint, John. The car looks like it's done a re-bearing or something in the back of the car, and you know, we're a couple laps down, and so you know, from here we may as well put it away and concentrate on Wayne and Neil in their co-car, and you know, live to fight another day.
Something happened around the back of Peter Brock's car as well. He says that the exhaust in fact blew and the car's been pushed to the back of the garage. Peter said there's no problem about oil or fuel, although there was a trail of oil leading back behind the garage. Now, you've done exactly the same thing. Tell me, what's going on with the Holdens?
Well, you know, the exhaust must be oil-cooled or something. I'm not really sure. All I know is with our car, until I pull the bits, I won't be 100% sure, but it just looks like it's done a bearing, and you know, it's just one of those things. I hope that we'll have enough time to rectify the problem by the time we get to Bathurst, and I'm sure we will. And, you know, we'll look forward to a strong result from the Coke team there.
Well, this race is supposed to be a test of destruction. You've certainly done it today.
Well, I've had a little bit of destruction. You know, hopefully we've used up our allotment of bad luck and get on with Bathurst.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
I felt as though they should have asked Brad Jones about Craig Lowndes. They shared a car at Bathurst last year, and Lowndes got all the glory. And I know that deep down Brad Jones felt, hang on, I've done an equal driving job to get the car where it is, but everybody says he's a hero, where am I? And yeah, I think you could probably be strong enough to say there was a bit of jealousy there, or feeling of unfair dealing, let's say, in the eyes of the press. But he'd done, let's sum it up by saying he did a superb job last year at Bathurst, Brad Jones. He's done a very good job in the 2-litre touring cars this year, and he is certainly a very worthy member of any team here, because he knows how to use these cars and get the maximum out of them for sure. Meanwhile, the sole surviving Coke car, number 7, is in 7th place. Wayne Gardner at the wheel, the diminutive figure that commanded the 500 Honda in 1987 and took it off to the World Championship, and who I'm astonished by Gardner. I think as a young, ambitious motorcycle racer, even you see a manager that he's used right till now, Harris Barnett, as John Bowe puts in another mid-14s, where other cars are doing 15s and some of them 16s. And Gardner went to see Harris Barnett ages ago in England, and he said, look after this money for me, put that aside as my fare home, manage me, keep the things in order. A tremendous business decision for a young, ambitious man who probably not most young men wouldn't do it. I now look at the Coke team down in the pits, and Gardner is the man putting it together, turning it out well in terms of the transporter as we go to the Winfield team, but doing a superb job as a businessman and a team manager. And I'm stunned by the business acumen of the 36-year-old. This is car 1, though. The Mark Scaife, Jim Richards, Winfield Commodore, Freddie Gibson team car. But normally...
Freddie with his hands in his pockets, quite relaxed.
Yes. Normally you'd expect to see it running somewhere near the front at Bathurst. It's 15th at the moment. It's done 100 laps, where the race leader's done 107. Not a nice day. Stops expected, with 107 covered by the leading 4 cars, Parsons, Grice, Bowe, O'Brien, on about lap 110.
Yeah, actually, I'm surprised that the Peter Jackson cars haven't come in earlier. They're now on tyres that are on a fair distance. They know they can do 60 laps on fuel, so I'm just very surprised they haven't pulled them in a little bit ahead of that 110 lap position and get back into the race, because the Shell cars are catching, they're whittling away that gap and cushion that they've got at the moment.
Parsons 5.36 seconds in front of Alan Grice, and to look at it there, Grice reversing it, 3/10 to the advantage of Alan Grice.
Which is the other reason for making the change and put the 2 number 1 drivers back in.
No, in fact opposite, half-second advantage to Parsons.
Of course, Parsons
they did those two.
Caught and gone away from Grice.
Grice is in the 16s, Parsons is in the 15s. Bowe 14.9, and Charlie O'Brien in 18, 4th place.
16. Yep, so why aren't the Jackson cars in to put fresh tyres onto the car and put the fast drivers in and have a battle with the Shell cars?
Well, ex-team manager Howard Marsden, I've felt for some while that one of the shortcomings of the Glenn Seaton team is the management back in the pits, that Glenn's doing perhaps too much managing out as he drives the car. But down on the pits is Ian Campbell.
Will Mark Larkin's car come in for a normal pit stop, the Mitre 10 car? Warwick Brooklyn pulled the car up in the pits, normal tyres, normal wheels, and then this, a massive fuel spill. It was caused through a pipe disconnecting in the dry brake system. They've got it under control. There was no fire, but they've lost a lot of time.
Well, I continue to marvel at the problems that can go wrong with that car, the eternal optimism of the team, and I wonder why so much goes wrong, quite honestly. I really do. But anyway, they have the budget. I think sometimes they're trying to do too much themselves. There are cars, people like David Attard with Larry Perkins engines and Larry Perkins car, that on a quite modest budget are going very well, when the Larkham team sometimes are trying to work out how to build the car themselves, how to build engines themselves, and while they do it, suffering, because it's a long, hard learning process. And the first thing you should do, I say this from afar, the first thing you should do is draw on the experience of the people who know what the state of the game is and how it is at the time.
Just reinforcing what we were saying before about the distance between the Shell cars and the Peter Jackson cars. When Bow got into the car, he was 33 seconds behind Parsons. He's now got that down to 24 seconds. He's taken 9 seconds out of the cushion. The pit stop's just becoming more and more critical.
So we've seen various race leaders, all of them bar one, Falcons, and that was Thomas Mazera from laps 61 to 67, a mere 6 laps led. But Glenn Seaton, Alan Jones, Glenn Seaton again, Thomas Mazera, Stephen Johnson, and David Parsons. So in other words, the chance for John Bow, on behalf of Dick Johnson, to lead the race for the first time, to join his son as race leader.
So we continue to look for this John Bow push. Not only is he catching the Peter Jackson cars, but he's moving away from Charlie O'Brien. He's now got a 10-second gap on Charlie, so Bow is definitely the man to be watching. Only man we can see coming up, still in the 14 seconds. And again, at the moment, he's able to pull this off. He's got, 65 laps to do on his fuel, which he says that he can do because they've got a new type of engine management system in that car, which is showing a great deal of efficiency. And the car's got speed, it's got power, it's got fuel efficiency, 2 excellent drivers, and they're certainly looking very good at the moment.
And Greg Murphy there just turning a 15, almost 15 dead, and 50 laps remaining now as Parsons, the race leader in car 35, that he shares with Alan Jones, comes by and completes 111 and does a 16.7 by comparison with Alan Grice's 111th lap at a 16.3. 5.6 seconds between them, a further 15 back to third place. Still chasing very hard. John Bow down on the pits, John Smales.
And indeed, I'm with Tony Murphy, the team manager for the Peter Jackson Glenn Seaton team. Tony, why haven't you brought the car in for its second stop yet?
John, we've been able to stretch the fuel mileage out a bit further, and we're going to run David as long as we can, bring it in, and it shortens the distance to the flag from there for Alan Jones.
You're losing just a little bit of ground, however, to the chasing Dick Johnson cars.
Yes, early calculations, because the Johnson cars came in around about the lap 30 or thereabouts with the pace car. I thought at that stage that they would have to make, in fact, another 2 stops after that. But I hear Dick saying that they're happy to go to the flag from there.
You believe him?
I've got my doubts.
So to you, better to stay out there and get the most out of the car before you bring it in?
Yes, at this stage, yes.
How long to go then to your stop?
David will be in about 3 laps' time.
Thank you, Tony.
And Howard Marsden, you don't agree about how many the Dick Johnson and co have, or don't have another pit stop.
I don't think they've got another pit stop because, as I said, Dickie's got a new form of engine management system. There's now an oxygen sensor in the exhaust system, which is what we use for emission control on modern cars, and he's able to, in fact, adjust the fuel mixture in the car virtually on the run or wherever he likes, and he can then make sure that he gets his performance and his fuel economy, and he can go further than anybody else.
Do you mean to say that the race cars have come up to the technology of the road cars?
Well, of course, racing's always led the breed, hasn't it?
This is an important point because people think road cars are low technology by comparison with races. Now, a road-going Falcon, in its engine management, in the computer system that runs it, tell us how sophisticated it is, how advanced.
What we call the EEC-5 engine management system on the Falcon is capable of doing nearly 1.5 million calculations a second. There's more power in that engine management system than the Americans used to go to the moon some 25 years ago. And in fact, that particular engine management system was developed by Ford with Cosworth in the Formula One racing team. So the technology is from Formula One into the road car, and now potentially from the road car back into the road touring race car.
It's astonishing, and I constantly marvel at the way modern cars work and the economy that you can get out of them, for instance. And even in race conditions, let's talk that in terms of, for instance, the litres. What is it, 3 3/4 litres per lap at Bathurst, something like that,
Something
I think?
like that, yeah.
Yes, so a bit hard to translate that to miles per gallon. But
what's important is to translate that into horsepower per fuel usage.
Fuel consumption depends on work done, rate of acceleration, and mass move, doesn't it?
And that's where the efficiency of the engine comes up. I mean, we at Tickford take that Ford calibration system from the standard Falcon and move it forward. And at last, here we've got first of the Peter Jackson cars coming in, car number 35.
The race leader then pitting. 113 laps completed.
But he's only 16 seconds ahead of Bow now that he has come in.
And they last pitted at lap 56, so that's 57 laps, and if they do 57 on that, they get to 160. You'd probably be right, probably. It's pretty tight. Maybe tight.
They claim to have got 63 last year, and they did get 60 previously. This is the first of the pad changes we've seen. They have been suffering from pad brakes on this car. It's the first of the front runners that had to actually change the brakes. So again, this pit stop's going to be, I think, longer than they really want at this stage in the race.
I got my maths wrong. There's 10 up their sleeve there, yes.
Good quick change there by the boys.
So, Alan Grice becomes a new race leader too in terms of drivers. He hadn't led this race previously. It was a good stop. Good stop for a pad change. And John Bow is 11.37 seconds in arrears, 114 laps completed. But he's got his pit stop under his belt and he's starting to look good. They won it from 15th grid position last year. They came from 7th this year, and they still haven't led the race yet. Yet they're looking strong now, Howard Marsden.
Yes, they are, and if we are correct on that fuel consumption, then they've got to have a problem to upset them, I think. Now this pad change, in fact, is interesting. The brake pads, when they're put in, are generally run in prior to practice. We call it bedding in. That's getting the heat into the brake pad, so you get a constant pedal feel. But we did notice there that Jones just had a little bit of a lock-up on this new pad change.
So Grice led one lap in car number 30, and from lap 115, and there it is. Briefly led when Parsons pitted in 35 and handed over to Alan Jones. And in this car, the handover, of course, is to Glenn Seaton, David Parsons. But it led for just a lap until it pitted, and John Bow, Dick Johnson, Shell team, stalled it. Glenn Seaton took about 5 seconds to get it firing properly.
Kept himself calm, which is good.
And look at that, surging down out of pit lane. There wasn't very much to the Attard car coming by at race speed. The Pinnacle car, at least. I think Attard's behind. So we'll get a full printout and accurate representation when they've all come past on their next flying lap. But it's Bow in 17 from Charlie O'Brien in 18. So Johnson's Shell team 1-2. And where's the best Commodore? It's in 5th place now, Russell Ingall. And car 30 coming down here. If you look at the distance, there's the lights of John Bow to put a lap on. There it is. And John Bow is in storming form at the moment, but Ben Seaton won't take any nonsense either.
No. Fresh brakes, if he's put them onto his car as well, fresh tyres, a determination not to be passed, and he'll certainly be running very hard. Bow, if he does come up behind these cars, won't be in any hurry to go past them. He's got enough time up his sleeve to look after the car and bring it home.
So fascinating situation here, and we'll tell you all about it when we bring you back to Sandown very shortly.
Welcome back to the Sandown 500, and in the pits is an exhausted Alan Grice, who's had all sorts of problems with the Glen Seaton Falcon. What have they been, Alan?
Well, Glenn had a little bit of problem with the brakes. We can still get in as deep as we want to, but we've got to pump the pedal up, so just a little bit awkward. That's really not a problem. But I was due in after 60 laps, but I got a light on that indicated I've run out of fuel. We've got a miss in the car at anywhere but dead flat out. So it's obviously richened up for some reason, and that's using more fuel. But anywhere on the track, when you're trying to drive the car out of a corner, you know, it's missing all the time and moving the car. But unfortunately, you can put up with that. That just makes you a bit slower. But the problem is that miss of richening up has used more fuel, so I've come in early.
In fact, lap 50, if he got 54 laps out of it only.
Yeah, well, that could be enough. That's why our stop was slow, because they were making sure they got absolutely every last drop into it, which should get Glenn home.
Well, in fact, your stop was very slow, 59 seconds. Your team car did 49 seconds, including a pad change. Now, you didn't take a pad change.
No, I didn't. But, you know, it won't be a long stop if it gets us home. They just made sure that every drop in it. Glenn's going to have to be careful on the revs. He's going to have to pull those back, I'd suggest, and just row it home.
And the other problem, of course, for Glen Seaton is that he doesn't have a radio in the car anymore. Alan came into the pits, absolutely scared the living daylights out of his pit crew because they had no way of knowing he was coming in.
Well, an interesting situation that's now been taken over by John Bow, 122 laps completed, 25 seconds in front of their fellow team car, number 18, Charlie O'Brien, in it. And John Bow, Dick Johnson now looking very solid indeed. They haven't had a good record over the years here, but last year they went to a very impressive victory from 15th grid position. Steady, John Bow. Take it, John Bow, to be able to haul that in, still on the brakes, and not lose the car at that moment. But that was a pretty untidy moment. And Alan Jones in 35 is in 3rd place. Larry Perkins is working his way forward a little bit. The best Commodore's in 4th. Glen Seaton is in 5th, and Longhurst. Now, there's a story on that. The Mark Larkham car parked off there at the side of the straight before the kink because it went through the sand trap at about 100 kilometres an hour and tore something off the front of the car. I don't know if it's a spoiler, but it's still sitting down in the sand trap.
It's the back of the car, actually.
The back section, hooked up with it.
The car came past us sounding very bad indeed. It had a big puff of smoke going into the left-hander off the front straight, through the sand trap, pulled off the rear spoiler, managed to get round to where it is, and that's their day run on this occasion.
And we heard of their problems earlier, and they do have a few problems and have had in the past. We should at this time welcome some very special viewers today, and I'm sure all our viewers are special, but they're not quite as special as Michael Doohan and Daryl Beattie, who are up on the Gold Coast. They're taking time off, 15 points apart in the 500cc World Championship, leading and in 2nd place, and they came home about 10 days ago. They're off on Wednesday to Brazil, so I'm sure all our good viewers would wish well to Michael Doohan and Darrell Beattie in the 500 World Championship. 3 Grand Prix remaining, and I believe 2 that up on the coast there is a man who won this race in 1993, Jeff Brabham, and he was with David Parsons. So when we're looking down our nose, you know, and saying spare driver, they won the race, he and Jeff Brabham in 93. Jeffrey not employed this weekend and watching up on the Gold Coast too. Welcome back to Australia to all of them. The permanent one, Jeff Brabham, but the temporary ones, Michael Doohan and Darrell Beattie, and I'm sure on behalf of all Australians, we all wish them well for the remaining rounds of the 500cc World Championship.
What is interesting at the moment is the way that Bauer's driving this car. He's got 27 seconds on his teammate, he's got over a minute on the nearest rival, but he's still bouncing the car around. So I believe that they're really trying to stretch the car and to see whether or not they can get through on their fuel consumptions. The car's strong enough, and again to pull the confidence factor for Bathurst.
They've been racing for 2 hours and 42 minutes. They've covered from 125 laps and a brake lock-up just in front of them there. Let's have a look down through the field at the total situation here in this Sandown 500, the 30th of such event since it started in 1964. There's several missing in the early 60s. So that's the top 6. The best Commodore's Larry Perkins. We come into more Commodores later because there are fewer Falcons racing overall. Wayne Gardner, Neil Crompton doing quite well considering 2 punctures to be up there in 8th place. Privateers Ashby and Reed back into it. A brand new car, Waldock, in 11th place. Poole and Ordinsky running nice and regularly and pulling up 12th there at the tail end of the field as we run through to the end. Brock Mazira falling to that in 05 with the parking of their car in the pits. When it pitted at the end of lap 68, it had led from 61 to 67, and the only Commodore leader of the race so far, and only for 6 laps. 119 laps being led by Falcon, and this car into the lead 10 laps ago. John Bauer from 115 and looking very good. Howard Marsden, in terms of the margin that they have now, the way they patiently work their car forward, and the man that they have at the wheel and the foot, that they have no more stops expected.
That's right. So they seem to have done a good job. They did take that chance of coming in early when there was the only occasion which we've had the pace car out, and they've run well and they've run hard. But the other one that's doing very well is Larry Perkins with the Commodore. He's into 5th position. He's not running quite as fast as the cars around him, but he's got that 5th position reasonably well protected from Longhurst. He's got a reasonable gap on that car. We'll have a look for the actual time in a minute. But at 5th position, in fact, he is the only Commodore up there.
So 41 years old John Bowe, who won the Australian Touring Car Championship this year, who won the 12-hour race at Eastern Creek for production cars and for Mazda last weekend, very much at the height of his powers, and this is despite being Australian Sports Car Champion in 1986 and in 84 and 85 the Australian Champion Driver in single-seater racing cars, winning at Bathurst in 89 and 94, over in New Zealand in 89. An outstandingly good driver, second here in 87 and 88 and 92 at Bathurst. So a man with enormous credits to his name, and as I say, most recently the Australian Touring Car Championship, where although when they went into the final round at Oran Park it was between him and Glenn Seaton and Peter Brock, I think in the opinion of most people the right man won it, in the sense that he was the class of the field this year. The car combination, the team management and so on had to get their way through the Dunlop tyre problem with the Cody earthquake and their plant being destroyed, and get tyres in the middle of the season from England and then adapt them, as he puts a lot of squeeze on the Commodore of Larry Perkins.
In fact, that Dunlop tyre story is interesting because, in fact, the molds, which are so important in the race tyres, were actually airshipped from Japan to England.
To England, yeah.
So that they could be produced in England. Now, it took the British tyre chemists some time to understand Australian conditions and Australian cars, but they feel now that there's very little difference between, in fact, the British tyre and the Japanese tyre, and later in this year they're going to have a back-to-back test between those two suppliers to see which tyres to use next year.
Early in the race, we said it was Bridgestone tyres first to fourth place. It's now Dunlop in first and second, Bridgestone third and fourth, Dunlop fifth, Yokohama sixth, and Yokohama seventh. So it's a very different situation. But to complete, we talk of John Bowe, an Australian champion driver, as we look here with Russell Ingall in Larry Perkins' car. But just to summarise John Bowe, Sandown last year, Bathurst in 94, the AGP race last year, the Touring Car Championship in 95, and the 12-hour. Boy, if most drivers won one of those, they'd be very happy, and John Bowe's won all of them.
But it still didn't allow him to take the qualifying run yesterday in that car.
No, Dick Johnson did that. Didn't come off as well as they might have hoped. He was seventh fastest in the qualifying yesterday. Dick's normally, it can be a very strong one-lap qualifier, but so too is John Bowe, and that was the way it went. They've come from seventh grid position, and they didn't do it in a rush. They did it in their own planned way and took advantage of that potential pit stop under the pace car around lap 33, and they've made it work for them, and they're now looking very solid in this race, Howard Marsden, with a very comfortable margin, a margin in fact that would allow them to make a flash stop if it were needed towards the end of the race.
Fastest car on the track at the moment, in fact, is Glenn Seaton, and he's 1:14.8, followed by John Bowe, who's doing 1:15.1. Apart from that, other cars are the middle 15s and into the 16s. So those are the two cars that are pushing on hardest. And again, isn't it interesting that Bowe is prepared to go so hard and in such a gutsy manner at this stage of the race? We've got roughly 30 laps to go.
And Longhurst is in the 15s too, a 15.5. Here's Castrol Falcon. Larry Perkins, by comparison, 16.8. I don't think Larry would be entirely happy with the sort of times he's been doing. He seems about 16s has been his comfortable time, although this is Russell Ingall, of course, in the wheel of the car. We were taken aboard for a ride just a little while ago. And then Wayne Gardner giving him a lot of hurry up is in car 7. He's in 8th place. And the situation is that Bowe has a lap now on Charlie O'Brien. So one lap down are O'Brien in 18, Alan Jones in 35, Seaton in 30, and Perkins in 11. Translate that, and I'll come back in a moment to the gap between first and second. But as they come across the start-finish line now, it's Longhurst also one lap down, he in 6th place, so the two Castrol team cars are together. And in fact, it continues with the two Shell team in 1-2, two Peter Jackson, 3-4, the two Shell, the two Castrol at least, in 5-6. Commodore leads Falcon there. And the gap between first and second, shown as a lap for a while, is in fact 32.6 seconds, 1 minute and 7 seconds back to Alan Jones. And 30 laps remain now. 131 completed and 161 scheduled.
It's interesting that Perkins is in 5th position and Longhurst behind him in 6th position. Now, Longhurst is 37 seconds behind Perkins, but catching him at about half a second a lap. So Perkins may well yet get home in that 5th position if he doesn't have any problems.
And in fact, racing for just under 2 minutes, 2 hours and 50, it only seems like 2 minutes. So about 40 odd remaining, I think, to last year's race time. So Russell Ingall here in Larry Perkins' car, used, like Larry was years ago, to seeing the front wheels poking out, and you've got a nice story about that, Howard Marsden, as now touring car expert Larry Perkins owns and drives the car. But Russell Ingall is very much that, and it years ago presented Larry with a problem.
Yes, he certainly did. Larry, of course, all of his background was single-seaters, including Formula One, and Harry Firth picked him up to drive Piranhas. and Larry could not settle to the touring cars because he said he couldn't see the front wheel. So in fact they cut out part of the firewall and the front wheel arch so that Larry could literally look down near his feet, see which way the wheels were pointing and get on with the job. Well, he doesn't need that sort of assistance anymore. He got new glasses.
He's a great runner and a great character. Designed and built the first solar-powered car that ran across Australia with
Hans Tholstrup.
Hans Tholstrup. I knew his name. Ran his own crazy car in the Mileage Marathon as car 3 has got a big problem. It's in 10th place at the moment. That's the Reed Ashby car. They missed 3 or 4 rounds of the Touring Car Championship this year, and it's had an exciting time in recent moments by the look of the front end of the car. Certainly doing the something major mechanical. Staying well offline, getting its way past the Mitre 10 car, but I hope not laying oil on the track. Pity for the Lansvale Smash Repairs guys. They're a great pair of characters. Steve Reed, Big Bird as they call him, must be about 6'5". I suppose that makes him over 1.9 metres tall. And Trevor Ashby, his teammate, grey-haired, much shorter, but business partners and also team drivers, and happily share the car meeting about, but missed out some rounds of the Touring Car Championship this year. Brief look at the race leader as we go then to 3rd place, Alan Jones. And let's have a look. There's plenty of oil on the front of that car, and this is what happened. Smack, whack, lock up. And it spelt the end. And oil cooler, oil line, somewhere around the oil cooler area.
Yep.
Look at it, streaked with oil, so very close at the front of the car. Why we call the water cooling system a radiator and the oil cooling system an oil cooler. It's a radiator, it's radiating away heat. And Paul Romano in the pits too. Romano in 7th place in car 24 at this stage, behind the factory teams, behind Shell, behind Peter Jackson, behind Castrol is this car 24. Paul Romano, he shares the car with Troy Dunstan, and they've done a good job. Now been overtaken by the Coke car 7, Wayne Gardner, Neil Crompton,
who is still in 7th place.
If they're going to finish 7 with number 7, why did they bother to go out there? I mean, just get it allocated. But slips off.
It's interesting, all the times have suddenly fallen back, and I wonder if oil, in fact, has got onto the circuit because they're running nearly 2 seconds a lap slower than they have been up until this time. So maybe the oil from that last little accident we saw, in fact, has slowed everything down.
And we just estimate that on the 30 laps remaining, 1:31 completed, and they're now 3 laps past that, that we're heading to a race record time of about 3 hours 28. The previous fastest 3 hours 32, which I think was last year. No, it wasn't. The Nigel Greenway book tells us this, and we'll have that answer in just a moment, but there was a faster time done a while ago. And it was done by Glenn Seaton and George Fury. That was Glenn Seaton's 3rd win here. 3 hours, 32 minutes and 42 seconds, averaging 140 kilometres an hour last year. Bow and Co. took 2 minutes longer, averaged 139.7. And big drama down in the sand pit near where Mark Larkham left the tail end of the Mitre 10 car. The other Parsons, not young David that's led the race in car 35, and currently running 3rd, but the car that he's sharing with John Goss. Who's the miscreant? They've backed it in and they've torn the front off, and if that were a Falcon, you'd be able to see the missing 200 millimetres. The bit that's nearest the sand there is the bit that's been taken off the Falcon. There we are. How nice of them to demonstrate. Let's see how it happened. In a moment, a car arrives so fast. No wonder they tore the thing off it. He had no chance of making the corner within about 20 Ks. No brakes?
No brakes. The only way he could cut, that's not a driver mistake. he ran out of brakes.
A driver couldn't miscalculate it by such a factor, you think?
Correct.
A driver could never be so ambitious?
No.
So what happens? And Russell Ingall coming into the pits, the best Commodore at this stage is in 5th. 134 laps completed, and might this fate late in the race befall some of the other cars? When did he last pit? We'll tell you.
It's interesting, Larry's still using the 5 separate wheel studs to hold his wheels on, whereas everybody else is in the centre single nut runner. Larry, being an engineer, never has trusted the strength and durability of those single nut runners, and insists on using the older but more reliable method. And the eyes are very wide open there. He's serious, is our Larry.
Oh, yes. Larry loves this stint, doesn't he?
You see the rev counter there on the Pi system, the black line over his shoulder there. See the revs that he's using.
Stretch it, 7.5 nearly. Watch it here. Can't get quite the max revs on board there as the Winfield car comes by. It rushing around trying to make up some lost ground. Hang on, Larry, you hit the wrong button there, lad.
He's looking for the reversing lug.
And he last pitted on lap 84, previously pitted on 34, so has gone 52 on this last stint with Russell Ingall at the wheel. So the Bauer Johnson car should be okay, it having pitted for its last stop at lap 94, giving it 67. There could be a splash needed. Could be a splash needed. But they have time to do it. But perhaps not over their teammates. Car 18 last having stopped at 96. So both the cars in positions 1 and 2 might need a quick stop, a churn of fuel, and we'll see if they've made the right strategy over Alan Jones, David Parsons in 35, which has changed positions with Glenn Seaton. It's got into the pits. So, major problem. Major problem for Alan Jones in car number 35, out of 3rd place in a whisker. Into the garage, barreled away, don't even think about it, it's gone. Kevin Waldock saying go down the right. Scaife Richards saying we'll make our own arrangements, thank you. Hold your race line is of course the entreaty to race drivers always, and let the car following you find its way. If you move, you're becoming unpredictable. If you stay on race line, he knows where you should be going. He can find other spots. Very nice of Baldock to try and help, but around the outside there wasn't the spot. Still interesting, Howard Marsden. What's your rethink on the race situation at this stage?
Well, we're really down to whether or not and engine's not happy in that car.
Spy cam looking into the garage that's been closed.
That's steam. So top end of the engine. There's Bo Seaton,
yes.
The father of young Glenn, who is in fact the engine builder. Not a man who smiles a great deal, but certainly no position to smile at the moment.
He's never forgotten the description I made of him some years ago, and he reminds me. But he has a long, droopy face like a very homely dog. He's a great bloke.
Yes, yes.
And it was 30 years ago that he won at Bathurst in a GT 500, and then's been involved with his son through his karting days and his early days in 2-litre cars and Skylines and so on.
Well, in fact, we gave Glenn his first drive away from his father's car with the Turbo Bluebirds. Went down to Baskerville, never been there before. Glenn had never been there before. Up against Masterton and against Price, and got pole position under those conditions.
Seaton to Longhurst, third to fourth, is 48.4 seconds. And that could become an interesting situation later, of course, with the loss of one PJ car. We now see Tony Longhurst in the best Castrol team car, ahead of Larry Perkins, and now up into 4th place, but John Smales has an important guest.
Alan Jones, they say smoking's a health hazard. What happened?
Depends on which brand, I suppose, John.
What occurred, mate?
The alternator bracket's broken, and that in turn has stopped the alternator from working, so it was a simple little bracket.
Steam, smoke, and indeed ultimately has taken out the engine as well?
Well, the engine got very hot, so rather than cook it and ruin it, there reaches a certain point where you call it a day, and that reached that point.
Alan Grice walked up to me and said, be wary, it'll come back out again, but it looks pretty terminal.
I don't share Alan's optimism. He's a politician, but that's ridiculous.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
Well, somebody once said years ago when the conrod let go, and we've got electrical problems, conrod just knocked the alternator off the side of the engine. I don't say that's what happened there, but it looks more serious than a car that's running a flat battery to me. Howard Marsden, get me off the hook here with Alan Jones.
No, well, I've certainly not seen an alternator bracket that steams before, but there have been people around longer than I have.
So this is the remaining car from the Seaton team, and it's running in 3rd place. It's in pursuit, if it can find something of the 2 Shell team cars. 20 laps remaining here at Sandown. This 30th running of the Sandown 500. Been a fascinating race over its years, and in 1964 I motorcycled down to Sandown to watch what I thought was going to be a fairly interesting race with people like Roberto Busnello from Italy in his Alfa Romeo, and a young Alan Moffat, looking very lively indeed in his Lotus Cortina, 2-wheeling over a bridge that they had somewhere here.
And that's a car he brought back from America, where he was running against us in the Works Cortinas in the middle 60s.
And I thoroughly enjoyed the race, and I've enjoyed it ever since. And there are occasions when this race has drawn bigger crowds than Bathurst. The atmosphere here with the big grandstand and so on has been outstanding.
Interesting now, the fastest car out there is, in fact, Larry Perkins. He's doing 1:15.1. That's faster than he was running through most of the whole of the race meeting, which means that the car was capable of this at any one time, but he had decided that the race pace was too fast. He didn't want to know about it. He knows that he's not right now, and he's pushing on from a position of 5th, but he's not going to catch anybody. He's obviously decided that his race strategy was wrong, and he's going to go on and test the car a little bit harder.
Talking of testing cars harder, the pace of the Bow Johnson car has been ferocious. If it does in fact knock, well, 1 or 2, but perhaps even the forecast 4 minutes off the race time, that fastest time done in 90 with Seaton and Fury. Last year they were good enough to win in a time 2 minutes slower, or 1.5 minutes slower. And it's been a pretty reliable race, this one, for most cars, but a few have fallen by the wayside in recent times. One of the Peter Jackson team car, as Glenn Seaton just bounces it up and catches it as the rear comes down and bites. Have a look at the cars. Brock Mazera on lap 67 and 78, 11 later. Ian Palmer, Brett Peters. Now, they had a spin and were stationary on the track, but got going again, but ran into further problems. Often one leads to another. 93 saw Attard and Greg Crick go by the board, which is a pity because they've run very good sprint racing. David Attard in his VP Commodore, the Alcare air conditioning car, and then car 4, Brad Jones, Win Percy, and they went by the board. Mark Larkham, Warwick Rooklyn, you saw that go out just recently, and Smerton and McConville, they lasted longer in car number 39, the Protec Computers Commodore.
And again, we were mentioning, as Larry Perkins came out of the pits last time, we talked about the gleam in his eye. He's the only car at the moment to run into 1 minute 14 or 1 minute 14.9. He's obviously decided he's got something to prove at the end of the race, and that is that he's built a good, strong car. It's just unfortunately people have pushed their cars a little bit harder through the whole of the race meeting.
So just a few laps ago, of course, Alan Jones parking car number 35 as well. And so the situation at this stage, wondering whether Dick Johnson, John Bowe can get through. Likewise, Charlie O'Brien and Stephen Johnson in car 18 in second place. Certainly Seaton can from here in third place in car number 30. And Tony Longhurst, this will be one of his best results for a while. And like David Parsons, there's another good young guy around known as Wayne Park. And he's doing a good job backing up Longhurst in car number 25. He's in fourth place. Larry Perkins sharing his car 11 with Russell Ingall. Best Commodore still only in fifth place, followed in car 24 by the Paul Romano car with Troy Dunstan in sixth place. So there it is, sixth place at the moment and doing a good job. Larry Perkins in front, that's fifth and sixth. But
there's a lap between them.
One lap difference. Falcons have won this race for the last 2 years. Commodore won here. Larry Perkins, Steve Harrington in 92. Nissan Skyline GTR, Mark Gibbs, Rowan Onslow in 91, and a Sierra. Glenn Seaton, George Fury in 90. Skyline before that, HR 31. Jim Richards, Mark Scaife. Interesting mix of cars, and the only other Sierra victory here was Alan Moffat and Greg Hansford back in 1988. So you see there, second placed, Charlie O'Brien, Stephen Johnson, car number 18, and further back is the Wayne Park, Tony Longhurst Falcon. Down in the pits is John Smales.
And Will Hagan, Alan Jones's retirement has sparked a whole string of them, because immediately behind Jones came young Craig Lowndes with Greg Murphy. The car was immediately put behind the pit wall, and according to team management, the problem is an engine. Then in came Neil Crompton. Wayne Gardner, already dressed in his civilian clothes, ambled out to see what was the matter. You get to that point of the afternoon when you just do that, don't you? And for Crompton, straight line vibration, no speed. This car is unlikely to turn a wheel again this afternoon as well.
Okay, well, down here in seventh place is the Pinnacle Motorsport car of Tony Scott. He's sharing it with Steve Ellery. We saw it spin earlier, if you remember, and it was across the track, but they got it going again. However, there's some real interest up between second and third place too, and hopefully we'll come to it shortly. Only 10 seconds between second and third place at this stage. But this car running well and very unobtrusively. Howard Marsden coming forward into seventh place.
Yes, and another one of those game plans by people with not so much money, who set out to do a job. They have a clean run, they don't have any major problems apart from that spin, and they get the rewards of coming up into the top 10.
Pinnacle Motorsport announced that they were going to have a two-car team in the Touring Car Championship this year, and they didn't achieve that. Grice and Tony Scott were to drive the two cars. Here's a splash for the race leader, Dick Johnson and John Bowe. They have 15 laps remaining. It's more than a splash.
Pair of tyres as well.
And if car 18 does it, it'll lose second place. John Bowe stays in the car, blasts out back onto the Sandown track again, 3.1 kilometres around. They've covered 147 of those laps. They need another 14 to go on to victory.
So the technology didn't save them. They did have to come in to take the splash, but obviously got more than enough time up their sleeves to do it.
Well, it gives Glenn Seaton's team manager one up over Howard Marsden.
Yes, it certainly does.
Because you didn't agree with him, and everybody sees these things differently and doesn't know for sure till it all comes about. John Bowe now very much hunched down, and this is the run to the flag. 147 laps completed by car 17 and 18 and 30. Only twice have 4 cars or more than 2 cars finished on the same lap as the leader, and once was last year. I've read Nigel Greenway's book, and it's 5.6 seconds now, the gap from car 18 in second place to 30 in third place. 5.6 seconds, very close. So if you think John Bowers busy, in behind him car 18 is fending off a very big challenge indeed.
Seaton's been running regularly 2 seconds a lap faster than Charlie O'Brien.
Glenn Seaton at the wheel of that car. Have a look, there is the situation between third, Seaton in car 30, and second, Charlie O'Brien in 18. Second drivers become critical here. A big gap to Tony Longhurst leading Larry Perkins, the 2 Castrol cars, but Falcon leads Commodore in that instance. And further down you see cars still going, but not all of them. In fact, the Wayne Gardner car out now, the Alan Jones car out now, the Ashby Reed car parked, Lowndes Murphy parked, and car 18 stopped on lap 96 just 2 laps later, and John Bow, Dick Johnson. So can 18, 5 seconds when we last saw them, and not that much, a little way behind the race leader and their own team lead car, but getting into a real scrap with Glenn Seaton chasing and with the real ability to get back into second place. Coming up towards 3 1/4 hours of racing now, and Seaton now is 3.13 seconds behind. There he is with lights on in the background. So this is the battle for second and third. Battle for second and third, and about half a lap behind their own team car. For all that stopped just a little while ago. But the question mark, do they need a splash as the lead car needed? Howard Marsden, you're saying they can sometimes use less fuel at race speed than at pace car speed, but equally Charlie O'Brien probably should be using less fuel than John Bow would be doing the times he's doing.
That's correct, because that's what John was doing, was really pressing on very hard, and he could have backed off obviously and gone without that splash, but decided that's what they wanted to do on this occasion. Certainly Glenn's got O'Brien in his sights. He's faster. He's been running over the past 15 or so laps, 10 to 15 laps at 2 seconds a lap faster. He's caught Charlie. He's going to go past him, and then the fuel figure is not important, provided Glenn has run that conservative race and made sure he's got enough to bring him home. And I think he must have.
Glenn Seaton hauled him in by 1.5 seconds on the last lap. On that lap, the gap became 1.2 between the two of them, as Glenn Seaton was 1.7 seconds faster than Charlie O'Brien. O'Brien in 18, Seaton in 30. .150 laps completed by these two and the race leader, John Bow. 11 remaining. In fact, closer to 10 now. And still not quite within seconds, though, of 3 1/4 hours of racing. 10 laps remaining. John Bow having completed it. So these two, second and third, third and second. To look at it the other way round now as Seaton goes through. Falcon fighting Falcon, though. It's the team boss, Glenn Seaton, and as he said earlier, with the cigarette company sponsorship finished actually on September 26 officially, but lengthened by government permission to cover Bathurst, then he needs a big bundle of money from somebody else, and he hasn't yet disclosed to anybody, and he did say a while ago that he doesn't have anybody of the size with the sort of budget that he's enjoyed and used very well, but enjoyed with Peter Jackson.
Glenn's obviously driving very well. Remember what Alan Grice said when he came out of the car, that he's having to pump the brake pedal, that the car's really got a problem with regard to richness, and the fact that it doesn't, you can hear it popping there, doesn't pick up properly. It's only good at wide open throttle. So for doing the times that he's done and really getting on with the job, young Glenn has done a super job out there.
I think one of the most endearing memories, long-lasting memories of Bathurst and Australian motorsport is of Glenn Seaton in the wet with the in-car camera over the top of the mountain of Bathurst. Fred Gibson, his then team boss, who was certainly in awe, and so were most other drivers and most spectators. It was just amazing footage. He was sliding and slithering and wandering all over the track, but he was still stuck into it. And the trouble with the cars these days is you don't always appreciate how fast they're going and how good the drivers are. But they really, Howard Marsden, they are sensational.
Yes,
to be able to hustle these 1.3-ton motor cars around as hard as they do.
That's the problem. In fact, I was talking to one of the team managers who has regularly brought in overseas drivers for co-driving at Sandown and particularly at Bathurst. And he said out of about half a dozen well-rated international drivers that he's used, he's only ever had one that can really come to grips properly with the mass, the weight, the speed of these particular vehicles. There's really nothing else like these cars racing anywhere else in the world.
Nothing of this mass.
Yep.
And you talked earlier of that with any car running off, the momentum that's built up, the momentum of 1.3 tons when it goes out of control. At 160, 200 kilometres an hour, you've got a very big problem, and the problem's going to last a fair while, isn't it?
Yes, it's a don't call me time.
Alan Jones once said to Frank Williams after a big crash, after Frank Williams had been going at him about how much money he had, sit on your wallet, you'll be comfortable. Alan Jones stepped away from the big crash and said, that's why you pay me so much. And they do. These guys live on the brink. They're testing new technology, not so much in the mechanicals, but for instance in the tyres. They're constantly going faster. And when you explore off into unknown territory, then you have the chance of things going wrong. I wonder if many people sitting and listening remember Ralph Satch, who was the winner of this race in '64 with Roberto Bussanello. I remember Ralph Satch well. He raced an FJ Holden called Din Din, and then he raced a single-seater made out of Nota, and it was called Nota Din. But he was a good FJ Holden racer back in those days. Frank Gardner, Kevin Buff, one of the next year, again in an Alfa Romeo. Two rally drivers, Tony Roberts, Bob Watson, one following, and then Alan Moffat came through in '69, and Alan Moffat won it a few times. He won it in '70, then it was Bond in '71, Goss, Brock, Moffat, and then Brock won it from '75 to '81, 7 times consecutively, twice for Moffat, then Brock, Larry Perkins, Jim Richards, Longhurst. So some very distinguished people and some old names coming back, very different to the names in this car. Paul Romano, car number 24, they're in 6th place now. So they get into a very respectable placing indeed. Paul Romano and Troy Dunstan. Explain to us the gearbox, Howard Marsden, and how it works. And this is the second best Holden, second only to Larry Perkins among the Holdens. You can see from this stand and all the switch gear, it's a Larry Perkins Commodore. That's how Larry does the control side for the car. Look at all the air ducting inside. But again, sorry, back to the gearbox.
No synchromesh on these gearboxes, so the boys have to what is known as double D clutch if they're changing up or changing down. And in fact, I was telling you before about young Glenn driving with us in the Turbo Bluebird. He went out for the first time to try the car, came back in, he couldn't run properly. I said, what's wrong? There's something wrong with the gearbox. It won't change gear. It was the first time he'd ever got into what we call a crash box. No synchromesh, had to get the engine revs and the road speed exactly right so you can have a nice clean change. And as I say, the young lad went out from there to take pole position.
It is like truck drivers have dealt with for years, and indeed the driver of a Fiat 500 and a lot of other cars way back. And of course, if you get the revs right, it's the sweetest change because it's got no synchromesh resistance. And it's tough. And that's why they happen, isn't it? They're so tough.
All built, in fact, by down here in Melbourne by Peter Hollinger, who is now world renowned for his motorsport gearboxes, both racing and rallying.
Yes.
And does a super job.
He's sold gearboxes to Nissan in Japan. He's sold them to BMW in Germany for their race cars. And along with Ron Harrop and some other very clever, dedicated engineers, surely those people are the mainstay of Group A racing in Australia, or top touring car racing.
That's the wonderful thing about these cars now. The knowledge of the cars, the engines are restricted because of compression ratio and also for the rev limit. So the engines are just about unburstable, except for Jones, of course, who had that water-cooled alternator bracket. But the gearboxes are all very strong from Hollinger. They're all running what is known as the 9-inch Ford diff at the back of the car, and the cars are very reliable, putting on a good show. 5 laps to go.
Yes, on lap 157 now is car number 17. Certainly it has no potential pit stop problem. Did it a little while ago. Has come from 7th grid position, and only one other car has won the car from 7th grid position, and it was until last year when the Dick Johnson John Bowe car won from 15th grid position. It was the worst grid position that the race had been won from, or alternatively from which the race had been won. And
paper going on here.
7th grid position, it was won from there once, and it was Alan Moffat, Craig Hansford in 1988. So from 15th grid position last year, Dick Johnson, John Bowe. So a remarkable achievement. Isn't easy to come from behind, but equally in a long distance race, being on the front row is not so critical. 4 laps remain, 157 covered, 12.4 kilometres remain between John Bowe and Dick Johnson and victory. And it's the first time ever for the same pairing of drivers in 30 years of running of this Sandown race, for the same 2 drivers to win the race. So, for Dick Johnson, in fact, for a long time, this was a very frustrating race for him. I think he had only about 5 finishes out of all his starts. And if you looked at him from about 87, when he had, that was the 2, 4, 6, 7th retirement of about 9 starts he'd had, it started to come good. He was 3rd in 88, he was 5th in 89, 2 more retirements, both with John Bowe and Ford Sierras, and then 6th in 93, 1st last year. So it started to come good, but for a long time it was a real demon race with him. Guess what John Bowe first drove here? The man at the wheel now of car number 17 first drove this race in 85 and 86. And if we start guessing what he drove,
85 and
86. Well, I have an advantage because I'm looking at the paperwork. He drove a Volvo with Robbie Francevik in 85 and Alfie Costanzo in 86, retired both years. Glenn Seaton he was with, the man he's leading at the moment in 87. They were 8th on the grid and they retired in a Nissan Skyline. And they started with Dick Johnson from pole in 88 and 89 and retired both years, 3rd and 5th. But pole, they had pole 4 consecutive years. Well, they didn't run in 91, but the 4 years they ran together, they were on pole position. Much better, it seems, to start further back. And 49 seconds now, the lead over Seaton in 2nd place. 7 seconds from him to 3rd place, the 2nd Shell Team car, Charlie O'Brien, Stephen Johnson. 2 laps remain, 6 kilometres. When they go now across the start-finish line, John Bowe. Devonport, Tasmania, on lap 160. You can hear the thing grab and bite and drive forward. Gee, they're angry things, aren't they?
It's a pleasure to watch them being driven as well as they are by John. still very nearly, I think, actually the fastest man out there. So again, their instructions have been to drive the pants off.
Marbles on the track, even there at the crest of the track, halfway across the track, not even in the corner, but on the crest. And to look at the tyre situation again, it's Dunlop, Bridgestone, Dunlop, Yokohama, Dunlop, Yokohama in the top 6. So it's pretty evenly spread. The thing that isn't evenly spread is the cars. It's 4 Falcons over the top 4 positions. The best Commodores, Larry Perkins, followed by Romano in 5th, 6th. Blasting round now, coming up to their 2nd consecutive win, and the large grandstand clapping a tremendous effort, encouraging them on their way for their last 3 kilometres of Sandown. 161 completed. They're coming up to do it in record time. Last year they took 3:34. This year they'll take 3:28 that we forecast just a little while ago. In fact, it'll be 27 something. So a record time over the previous 3:32 of more than 5 minutes. And everybody down the pit saying, oh no, the pace is all right, pace is all right, pace is hot. Romano on Bridgestones, I said he was on Yokohama's, I think I might have said it a couple of times. But 6th place is Bridgestone, so it's Bridgestone 2 and 6. Dunlop's 1, 3, 5. And they look back now to see John Bowe coming down the straight. The other team car goes through and holding 3rd place, but coming onto the straight with the lights on comes John Bowe, partnered with Dick Johnson and going to his 2nd consecutive major victory in 7 days after winning the Eastern Creek 12-hour last weekend. They blast through to win the Sandown 500 on the 30th occasion of its running, and a glorious and hard-fought victory it really was too. And they didn't take the lead for the first time until lap 115, but they never lost it after that. Ian Campbell's with team chief Dick Johnson down in the pits.
Dick, it's been a record today, not only the win, and of course if we look back, the Shell Australian Touring Car Series, a bit of a warm-up in the Mazda last week, and then John and you into victory lane today. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Ian. It's been a hell of a team effort, I can assure you. I'd just really like to say thanks to the guys. They've done absolutely a magnificent job when we really got put behind the 8 ball with this front spoiler deal. But we'll do a lot more work between now and Bathurst and see if we can claw back some of the speed we had.
It wasn't just the front spoiler, there was all the rumours running around this week, lightweight bodies and all the other carry-on. What sort of pressure did that put the team under?
Well, I try and divorce myself from all of that sort of stuff and just get on with the job, because it's hard enough these days just driving the car, let alone worrying about all the politics.
Dick Johnson into victory lane 2 times in the row for the Sandown 500.
So a tremendous victory, not only to do it here for the 2nd consecutive year, but for Johnson and Bowe in 7 days to win firstly a 12-hour race, then a 500-kilometre race in a much faster car. It says something about their driving, about their fitness, about their keenness to win, about their race strategy, about their calmness, and really a sensational effort by both of them. And it really says, surely, that with Bathurst coming up as a combination, 2-driver combination, this is so critical, and people talk of all sorts of theories and spoilers and gosh only knows what, but when it gets down to it, you've got to have 2 hot drivers in the car. You can't afford to have a hot driver and a part-timer, I believe. But we'll discuss more about it and all the other ramifications and results of this 30th Sandown 500 when we come back here shortly. Well, that's the Sandown circuit. It's seen this historic 30th running of the enduro race. Sometimes it's been 400 kilometres, sometimes a 6-hour. In this instance, the more traditional 500-kilometre race, and another glorious victory to Dick Johnson and to John Bowe. And a large crowd here enjoying both the glorious Melbourne weather, but also a very hard-fast motor race. A very impressive speed indeed. A new race record time and speed by Bow and Johnson, albeit that they didn't get the race lap record. A race that saw some tremendous dicing and cheeky racing early on when Craig Lowndes wanted the lead. When Johnson and Bow were staying back, they were in 7th from 7th grid position in the early part of the race. They gradually grabbed 6th grid position and then 5th. They weren't in a big hurry. And it was lap 115 before they ever saw the lead, but then they never relinquished it. And most importantly, they had it on lap 161, which is the only one where they really count it and put it into the record books. So a great victory, and on top of consecutive years here at Sandown, victorious in the 500. Last weekend, the pair victorious in the Eastern Creek 12 Hour. So an outstanding driving effort by the recently crowned Australian touring car champion and his teammate and team boss and team owner, 5 times Australian touring car champion. And not a bad backup either from Junior Johnson, young Stephen, who did a tremendous job and for a while there was dicing faster and lapping faster than his father and team boss, Dick. In behind is John Davison. He always gets very smiling and munificent at this time of day with the crowd and so on, and he's been a gutsy promoter of the Sandown meeting, and thank goodness on one occasion he's had some very good weather and a good crowd that'll probably help him survive financially, because it can be a very precarious business running motor racing. Let's have a look at the top 5. 161 laps completed by Dick Johnson, John Bow in car number 17, Falcon for Shell FI Racing. From Glen Seaton, Alan Grice in car number 30 on the same lap and not so very far behind. Then Charlie O'Brien, Stephen Johnson bringing the second podium position to Shell FAI. Tony Longhurst, Wayne Park for Castrol, Longhurst Ford in car 25 for Falcons. The best Commodore, Larry Perkins, Russell Ingle for Castrol Perkins Racing in 5th place to car number 11. And down on the grid, just a moment, we should be able to hear from the winning pair and John Bow with John Smales, I think. So they're down there, the crowd's really crowded around them. It's pretty hard to get everything into order, the cameras and interviewers and the drivers. Everybody wants to shake their hands and wants to comment and wants to hear about how it all happened. It was, but overall, it was a tremendous performance by Johnson and Bow. Most impressive, and I must say I stand aside and salute the way those two are driving and the way they're running their team at the moment. And I think a lot of other teams would be very cautious about Bathurst in 4 weeks' time. But let's go down now to the presentation and to John Smales down there on the victory dais.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the dais the winners of the Sandown 500 for 1995 and the promoter of the event, Mr. John Davidson. John, sensational day's racing.
Thank you very much, John. Fantastic job again by SBS and absolutely brilliant coverage, and full credit to you for emceeing it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great honour yet again to stage the Sandown 500 and to see all the fans coming out of the stands, and the procedure will be we'd like to welcome Glen Seaton and Alan Grice. Sorry, Stephen Johnson.
Let's have Stephen first. So let's go to 3rd place for a start, John? So if John gets the trophies, let's bring down, I think, the youngest man ever to stand on this dais for a Sandown 500 podium finish, Stephen Johnson with Charlie O'Brien. To present the trophies, John Davidson.
Thank you very much.
Stephen, it's Father's Day today, and you almost taught your old man a lesson.
To be truthful, he told me to slow down because I wasn't allowed to beat him.
Is that correct?
No, he just got on the radio and said you're doing a really good job and to keep going, and which I did, and I had one of the longest stints in our team this race, and I'm really happy.
How happy are you? I mean, to be up here on the podium of the Sandown 500 is something sensational for a 20-year-old.
Well, just to finish 3rd is really fantastic, but also to lead it through the race was a really big buzz for me, and it really kept me going, and I'm really happy we finished where we did.
Stephen, congratulations.
Thanks, John.
Well done. Charlie, very quickly, well done, mate.
Thanks, John.
Good driving.
Thank you.
How is this young Stephen Johnson? Is he a good bloke in the motor car?
Stephen done a great job in the car. His lap times were excellent, and the car came back perfect. So really, he done a great job. I couldn't wish for a better co-driver.
Well done, Charlie.
Thank you.
Let's bring up second position. OK, folks, you ready for second place? For Peter Jackson Racing, Glenn Seaton and Alan Grice. Glenn, but for one pit stop, wouldn't it have been something else again?
Yeah, it was a good race. It was a very hard race. It was quite torture there early in the race with Craig Lowndes and that, but no, I really enjoyed the day. Thank you to my sponsors who have supported me, Peter Jackson, Ford, Bridgestone, and also Ingersoll Rand. Thank you.
Glenn, looking forward to Bathurst. Not a bad victory today, but one car fell to pieces, or at least stopped. Bathurst has always, for you, been the race you can't win. What about this year?
Yeah, it has been, and definitely today we've learned a hell of a lot. The two cars ran great up until Alan stopped, and I'm really impressed with the team. The guys in the team have done a brilliant job. They've put a lot of effort in, and thank you to them, because without them guys, we wouldn't be up here on the podium.
Glenn Seaton, ladies and gentlemen. Alan Grice, come here quickly. Well done. This bloke can carry a race car home on his back, and he almost did that in his stint today. Just about everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong in your stint racing.
Yeah, we did have a few problems with the car, but Glenn and I both carried it home, and I'd like to thank him very much for giving me the drive this year. And I think it's worthwhile noting that although Fords are 1, 2, 3, 4, the Holden stopped. It had nothing to do with spoilers or the thickness of the metal.
I should hastily point out that Sandown has always been a car breaker, and we saw that happen today as teams tested their cars to destruction. Well, one car that didn't destruct today was car 17, driven by Dick Johnson and John Bauer. Dick, you first. This time last year, you won the Sandown 500, the race that had always eluded you. Since then, you've won the Tooheys 1000, you've masterminded Bow into the Australian Touring Car Championship, you won the Eastern Creek 12-hour last year, now the cycle starts again at Sandown. Can you keep it up?
I don't know, John, but I surely hope we can, because I don't think we've had a better team of guys. I certainly have never, ever, in the history of my actual career, ever had a guy that's driven with me that's been so good as John. He's been with me for 8 years now, and he's a tremendous help to the team. He's a real team player, and I'd really just like to thank the guys for giving us a fantastic car that didn't break. How it didn't break, I don't know, because you'd think you're on a pogo stick going up the back straight there. But we'll sort that out before Bathurst, and I reckon that we're half a chance of winning another one.
Well, Dick, what about your Father's Day present? Third place for the young bloke, for Junior.
Well, I think Charlie and Steve did a magnificent job. You know, they just kept smoking on against all odds, and I think that, to be quite honest, I rang them up on the radio and when they told me that Steve was leading the race, and I said, well, tell him just remember it is Father's Day, so I told him to back off, you know.
OK, well done. Let's, if we can, now welcome to the podium the Shell Australian Touring Car Champion for 1995, John Bauer. As Dick said, it's been 8 years with the team, and now all of a sudden, it just doesn't seem to stop, does it? Everything's working out.
Well, John, I hope it never stops, but it's been eight very, very happy years. It's a tremendous team. The guys under Ross Stone did a wonderful job. The car was just terrific, so strong, and that's just a testament to the amount of work and development they do, and I'd like to thank them publicly, and I hope we can do the same thing at Bathurst.
John, the fuel consumption as well, just sensational. He got 64 laps out of it compared to other teams which were struggling to get towards 60. Was it a driver secret or was it a car secret?
No, mate, it's Alan Draper, who works for Dick, has been with him longer than me, and he's a bit of a genius, so thanks to Alan we managed to stretch it further. It's just a team effort. Everybody does their bit, and the drivers get the accolades, but they really mastermind the win.
Well, Dick